My son and his wife went on a luxury cruise, leaving me to babysit my 8-year-old grandson who was born mute. But when the heavy front door finally shut, he looked at me and said in a perfect, clear voice, "Grandpa, do not drink the tea Mom made. She plotted to kill you." My blood ran cold and the ceramic cup shook in my hands as I looked down at the dark liquid that was supposed to be my bedtime medicine before I tell you how a simple cup of tea turned my own home into a crime scene. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect yourself from the very people you raised. My name is Isaiah Washington, but my friends call me Zeke. I am 72 years old, and for 40 years I ran logistics for one of the biggest shipping companies on the East Coast. I know how to read a manifest, I know how to spot a missing crate, and I certainly know when someone is trying to hustle me. But the blind spot for every man is his own family. Retired 5 years ago with a comfortable pension, or at least that is what I let my son Darius and his wife Courtney believe in reality. I have a portfolio of real estate and stocks that I built quietly over decades, buying properties in Florida when the market was low and investing in tech before the boom. I never told them about the millions in the trust funds. I never told them about the offshore accounts. I wanted Darius to build his own man, to earn his keep the way I did. Growing up in a one-bedroom apartment in Chicago. But looking at Darius, now standing in my foyer surrounded by Louis Vuitton luggage, I saw a man who had never really grown up. He was 36 years old, but he still looked at his shoes when I spoke to him. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes darting around the room, everywhere except at me. He looked like a kid who had broken a window and was waiting to be caught. Courtney, on the other hand, was a picture of suburban perfection. She was a petite blonde woman with a smile that could freeze water. She was adjusting the collar of my shirt, her nails digging slightly into my skin. "Listen to me, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with that sugary sweetness that always made my teeth ache. "We are going to be gone for 2 weeks. The cruise has terrible reception, so we might not be able to call every day. But you have everything you need right here." She gestured to the kitchen counter where a large glass jar filled with a dark, dried herbal mixture sat. It looked innocent enough, like something you would buy at a high-end farmer's market. "This is the special blend Dr. Miller recommended for your heart," she continued, her blue eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that felt unnecessary. "It will help you sleep, it will keep your blood pressure down, but you have to be consistent, Dad. 1 cup every single night right before bed. Promise me." I looked at the jar and then at Darius. "Son, are you okay?" I asked, ignoring Courtney for a second. "You seem sweating." Darius flinched. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "Yeah, Pops, I am just stressed. You know, packing and everything. We just really need this vacation. Just do what Courtney says. Okay, drink the tea. Take care of Leo. We will be back before you know it." He grabbed the handles of the suitcases, his knuckles turning white. It was the grip of a desperate man. I had seen that grip before on dock workers who owed money to loan sharks, on drivers who were hiding contraband. I should have known. Then, I should have trusted my gut that screamed that something was wrong. But I was a father, and I wanted to believe the best. I wanted to believe that my son was just tired, not that he was an accomplice. Leo was sitting on the stairs, hugging his knees. He was 8 years old, small for his age, with big, expressive eyes that took in everything. He had not spoken a single word since he was 5 years old. The doctors called it selective mutism triggered by trauma. They said it happened right after my wife Ruth passed away, a tragic accident down the stairs. They said Leo had been the only one home with her, and the shock had stolen his voice, or so we thought. I walked over to him and ruffled his hair. "Do not worry, little man. Grandpa is going to take good care of you. We will watch all the old westerns you like. We will order pizza." Leo looked up at me, and for a second, I saw something in his eyes that looked like terror, pure, unadulterated fear. He looked at his parents by the door and then back at me, and he stayed silent. Courtney clapped her hands, breaking the moment. "Okay, boys, we have to go or we will miss the tide. Dad, remember the tea, 1 cup boiling water steep for 10 minutes every night. It is crucial for your health, do not forget." I nodded. Yeah, I got it. "Go enjoy your boat ride." Courtney leaned in and kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. She whispered, "Enjoy your sleep, Dad." It sounded like a threat wrapped in a wish. Darius did not even hug me. He just gave a quick wave and hauled the bags out the door, without looking back. When the heavy oak door clicked shut, the silence in the house was immediate and heavy. It was a large house, too large for just an old man. But I had kept it because it was where I raised Darius, where Ruth and I had danced in the living room. Now it felt like a mausoleum. I let out a long sigh, rubbing my aching knees. "Well, Leo," I said, turning to my grandson. "Just you and me, kid. How about I make myself a cup of that fancy tea, and then we figure out what is for dinner?" I walked into the kitchen. The jar of herbs seemed to glow under the under-cabinet lights. I am a creature of habit, and I respect instructions, so I put the kettle on. I watched the water boil, the steam rising up like a ghost. I measured out a scoop of the dark leaves. They smelled strange, not like chamomile or mint, but something earthier, slightly metallic, like old pennies. I poured the water. The liquid turned an inky black. Almost instantly, I let it steep, just like Courtney said. 10 minutes, I watched the clock on. Watched the microwave count down. I thought about Darius. I thought about how much money I had secretly set aside for him, waiting for him to show me some responsibility. I thought about how much debt he might be in to look that nervous. I decided that when they got back, I would finally sit him down and tell him about the money, help him get straight. Maybe that was all he needed, a fresh start. The timer beeped. I poured the black liquid into my favorite ceramic mug. It said, "World's best, Grandpa." A gift from Courtney, 3 Christmases ago. The irony hits me now, but at the moment, I just wanted to soothe my old bones. I blew on the steam. The smell was pungent, almost overpowering. Leo had walked into the kitchen. He was standing by the island, his eyes fixed on the mug. His little hands were clenched into fists at his sides. I picked up the mug. "All right, Leo," I said, lifting it to my lips. "Let's go. Turn on the TV." I was inches away from taking that first sip. I could feel the heat on my face, and then in a blur of motion, Leo lunged. He did not run like a child playing. He moved with the desperation of a soldier diving on a grenade. He slammed into my legs, knocking me off balance. "Hey, watch it, kid!" I shouted, stumbling back. The hot tea sloshed over my hand, burning my skin, but I managed to keep hold of the mug. Leo did not stop. He grabbed my wrist with both hands, his grip surprisingly strong for an 8-year-old, and he pulled down with all his weight. "Grandpa, no!" he screamed. I froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. The silence of the house shattered, not by the noise of the struggle, but by the sound of his voice. It was not a hoarse whisper. It was not a struggle for words. It was clear, articulate, and terrified. "Leo," I stammered, staring at him. You spoke." He did not let go of my wrist. His eyes were wide, brimming with tears. He looked at the door as if expecting his parents to burst back in and punish him. Then he looked at me, and the words he said next tore my heart out of my chest and stomped on it. "Not drink it, Grandpa," he said, his voice trembling but steady. "Mom said, if you drink that every night for 2 weeks, you will sleep forever. She told Dad it was the only way to fix everything. She plotted it. Grandpa, she plotted it all." I stood there, the burning tea dripping off my hand onto the floor, unable to process what I was hearing. Sleep forever. Fix everything. The pieces of the puzzle started to slam together in my mind. Darius. Nervousness. Courtney S. Cold. Insistence. The specific instructions for 2 weeks, exactly the length of their cruise. "Leo, what are you saying?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. He let go of my wrist and stepped back, wiping his eyes. Mom said, "It is a slow medicine," she said. "It looks like a heart attack." She told Dad that once you are gone, the house is theirs and the insurance money will pay off the bad men. The bad men. Darius owed money. I knew he gambled. I knew he liked the high life, but murder, parricide for insurance money. It was a leap my mind refused to take. Not my son. Not the boy I taught to ride a bike. "You are lying." "Leo," I said instinctively, defending my own flesh and blood. "This is a bad joke. Did you see this on TV? Why are you talking now? Why, Haven, not you spoken for 3 years?" Leo looked at me with a maturity that an 8-year-old should not possess, because she said, if I ever spoke, she would send me away. She said I would go to a place where no one loves me, just like she sent Grandma Ruth down the stairs. The room spun. Grandma Ruth down the stairs, my wife, as death had been ruled an accident, a slip on a loose carpet runner. Leo had been the only witness, 5 years old, standing at the top of the landing, silent, traumatized. Courtney had held him while he cried. Courtney had explained to the police that he saw his grandmother trip. "Did you see Mommy push Grandma?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Leo nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Grandma found Mommy a special pills. Grandma said she was going to tell you. Mommy pushed her and then she told me, that if I ever made a sound she would do the same to me or send me to the orphanage. But I cannot let her hurt you too. Grandpa, I cannot be quiet anymore." My knees gave out. I sank onto the kitchen stool, the mug still in my hand. The liquid looked like tar now, like death in a cup. I looked at the boy, my brave grandson who had lived in a prison of silence for 3 years to survive a monster living under my roof. "Prove it," I whispered, not to him, but to the universe. I needed to see it. I needed to know that this tea wasn't just tea. Leo pointed to the potted peace lily in the corner of the kitchen, the one Ruth had planted years ago. "Pour it there, Grandpa," he said. I walked over to the plant, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I tilted the mug and poured the black steaming liquid into the soil. For a second, nothing happened. I held my breath, hoping Leo was just a confused child, hoping that the soil would just get wet and I could laugh this off as a nightmare. But then a sound filled the quiet kitchen. A soft hiss like a snake. The soil began to bubble. A white frothy foam started to rise up around the base of the stems. The green leaves of the peace lily, usually so vibrant, seemed to wilt before my eyes, turning a sickly yellow at the edges as the roots absorbed the toxic sludge. It hissed and popped, a chemical reaction between the concentrated poison and the fertilizers in the soil. I dropped the empty mug. It shattered on the floor, the sound like a gunshot. I looked at the dying plant. Then I looked at Leo, who was trembling by the refrigerator. My son had not just gone on vacation. He had left me in a gas chamber. He had signed my death warrant and left his own son behind to watch me die. I felt a cold rage settle over me, deeper and darker than any ocean it replaced. The shock, it replaced the grief. The Isaiah Washington who ran logistics, who managed crews of rough men on the docks, who built a fortune from nothing. That man woke up in that moment. I looked at Leo, and for the first time in years, I stood up straight, my back pain forgotten. "Leo," I said, my voice steady, low and dangerous. "Go, get your shoes, get your coat, and bring me your tablet." "Where are we going, Grandpa?" he asked, wiping his nose. "We are not going anywhere," I said, walking over to the cabinet where I kept my old lockbox. "We are going to stay right here, but we are going to prepare a welcome party for when your parents get back, because if they want to play games with my life, they are going to find out that they are playing with the wrong old man." I looked at the bubbling soil one last time. They wanted me to sleep forever. Instead, they just woke me up. I watched the last bubbles pop on the surface of the soil where the peace lily was already beginning to droop and turn a sickly yellow. The smell of the tea, that metallic, earthy scent, seemed to fill the entire kitchen, coating the back of my throat like dust. Panic is a luxury for people who have someone else to save them. I did not have that luxury. I was 72 years old, alone in a house with a traumatized child, and I had just survived an assassination attempt by my own daughter-in-law. I did not scream. I did not throw the mug against the wall. Instead, the old instincts from my days managing the logistics of international shipping kicked in. When a container goes missing or a crane collapses, you do not cry. You secure the scene. You gather evidence. You document everything. I walked over to the cabinet where I kept my old pill bottles. I found an empty one, washed it out, and carefully poured the remaining liquid from the teapot into it. My hands were steady, steadier than they had been in years. Rage has a way of focusing the mind like a laser. I sealed the bottle and wrapped it in a Ziploc bag. Then I went to my study and pulled out my little black book, the one with numbers that didn't exist in my phone contacts. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Samuel Evans. He used to run the toxicology screenings for our union workers, keeping the docks safe. Now he ran a private boutique lab downtown, handling discreet testing for wealthy clients who didn't want police involvement. "Sam," I said when he picked up, "I need a favor. A big one. I have a sample that needs a full-spectrum analysis. Priority 1. I am sending a courier now." I didn't tell him what it was. I didn't tell him who it was for. In my world, information was currency, and I was currently bankrupt until I knew exactly what was in that bottle. I called a private courier service, paying triple for an immediate, no-questions-asked pickup. Within 20 minutes, a biker in black leather took the package from my porch and vanished into the night. Only then did I turn back to the boy. Leo was sitting on the oversized leather armchair in the living room. He looked so small, his legs barely reaching the edge of the cushion. He was clutching a throw pillow to his chest, his eyes wide and unblinking, tracking my every movement. I went to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water from the tap. I drank one in a single gulp to show him it was safe, then handed him the other. He took it with trembling hands. "We need to talk, Leo," I said, pulling the ottoman close so I could sit directly in front of him. I kept my voice low the way I used to talk to Darius when he scraped his knee. "You saved my life tonight, son. You are a hero. But now I need you to be brave one more time. I need to know everything." Leo looked down at the water. I could see his throat working, the muscles tight. Speaking was foreign to him. It had been 3 years of silence. 3 years of pointing and writing on tablets. "Why now, Leo?" I asked gently. "Why did you decide to speak today?" He took a sip of water and looked at me. His voice was raspy, unused, but clear. "Because she left," he said. "She is on the boat. She cannot hear me." The logic of a child. He thought distance was safety. He didn't understand cell phones or cameras yet, but he understood physical presence. "Leo," I asked the question heavy on my tongue. "Why did you stop talking?" "The doctors said it was the shock. They said it was because you missed Grandma Ruth." At the mention of my late wife, Leo flinched physically as if I had slapped him. Tears instantly welled up in his eyes, spilling over onto his cheeks. He set the glass down on the coaster with a clink that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "It was not the shock, Grandpa," he whispered. "It was the secret." My heart hammered against my ribs. What secret? Leo took a deep breath, his small chest heaving. "That day, on the stairs." Grandma didn't slip on the carpet. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For 3 years I had lived with the image of my beloved Ruth, my partner of 40 years, losing her footing on the loose runner at the top of the landing. I had blamed myself for not fixing that carpet sooner. I had spent 1,000 nights staring at the ceiling, wishing I had been home to catch her. "What are you saying?" I choked out. Leo looked me dead in the eye, and I saw a darkness there that no 8-year-old should ever know. Mommy was angry. Grandma found the papers. The papers about the money Dad stole from your account. Grandma said she was going to call you. She said she was going to call the police. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Ruth had mentioned some discrepancies in the bank statements a week before she died. I had told her it was probably just a bank error, and I would look into it later. I never did. Mommy followed Grandma to the stairs. Leo continued his words, rushing out now like water from a broken dam. Grandma turned around to yell at her, and Mommy just pushed her. She used both hands, Grandpa. She pushed her hard. I closed my eyes, a guttural sound escaping my throat. The image was searing itself into my brain. Courtney, the woman who brought casseroles to church, the woman who smiled in family photos, pushing my Ruth, and then I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Then Mommy came down the stairs. She stepped over Grandma. She didn't call 911. She looked at me. I was hiding behind the plant stand. She saw me. She grabbed my face. Leo put his own hands on his cheeks, reenacting the horror. She squeezed my face really hard. She said, "Leo, if you say one word, if you make one sound, Daddy will hate you. Daddy will leave you at a shelter. Daddy only loves good boys who keep secrets. If you talk, you will have no family. You will be all alone in the dark." I pulled Leo into my arms, burying my face in his shoulder to muffle my sob. It wasn't just murder. It was torture. Psychological torture of a 5-year-old child. She had held his father's love hostage. She had weaponized his fear of abandonment to cover up a homicide. "And Darius?" I asked, pulling back to look at him. "Did Daddy know?" Leo shook his head, but then he hesitated. "Daddy is scared of Mommy," he said softly. "Daddy does whatever Mommy says. When Mommy told him Grandma fell, Daddy cried. But later, when I tried to write it down for Daddy, Mommy found the paper and burned it. She told Daddy I was lying because I was sick in the head. That is why they wanted to send me away." It all made sense. The sudden urgency to put Leo in a special facility. The way Courtney hovered whenever Leo and I were together. She wasn't protecting him. She was guarding her secret. We sat there for a long time, the grandfather and the grandson, bound by a truth too terrible to speak aloud. I felt a coldness settling into my bones that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. I had let a viper into my nest. I had fed her, clothed her, and let her raise my lineage. Suddenly, the notification chime on my laptop pinged from the dining table. It was the only sound in the house, sharp and digital. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy, and walked over to the computer. It was an email from Sam Evans. Subject urgent, toxicology report. I clicked it open. The screen was bright in the dim room. I scanned the technical jargon, the charts, the numbers. I didn't need to understand chemistry to understand the red bold text at the bottom. Detected digoxin cardiac glycoside, lethal concentration. Detected warfarin anticoagulant, high levels. I read Sam's notes underneath. Zeke, call me immediately. This isn't a sleeping aid. This is a cocktail designed to mimic heart failure. The warfarin thins the blood to prevent clotting and mask the cause, while the digoxin causes fatal arrhythmia. Given the concentration, daily ingestion would cause cardiac arrest within 10 to 14 days. It would look exactly like a natural heart attack in an elderly patient. Whoever made this knew exactly what they were doing. Get out of the house. I stared at the screen. Digoxin. Derived from the foxglove plant. I remembered Courtney gardening last summer, boasting about her beautiful foxgloves. She wasn't gardening. She was manufacturing a weapon. 2 weeks. They were going on a 2-week cruise. They expected to come back to a funeral, a grieving son, and a massive inheritance. It was a perfect plan. Clean, quiet, deniable. Except for one variable. The boy they thought was broken. I looked back at Leo, who was watching me with fearful eyes. He was waiting to see if I would crumble. If I would call the police and let them take him away to foster care while the investigation dragged on. If I would be the victim they thought I was. I closed the laptop slowly. I walked back to Leo and knelt down. Leo, I said, my voice hard as steel. You are not going to a shelter, and I am not going to die. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old flip phone, the one with the encrypted line I kept for emergencies. We are going to play a game, I told him, a very quiet game. We are going to let them think they won. We are going to let them think the tea is working. Leo tilted his head. Why, Grandpa? Because I said, looking at the dark window where my reflection stared back, an old man with fire in his eyes. I don't just want them caught. I want them destroyed. I want them to lose everything they thought they were stealing from us. I stood up and went to the window. The reflection of the room behind me showed a house that was no longer a home. It was a battlefield. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer, Weiss. It was 11 p.m., but Weiss would answer. He always answered for me. Change of plans, I whispered when he picked up. Don't sell the stocks yet. I need to restructure the trust. And Weiss, find out who holds the mortgage on my son's debt. I'm going shopping. The war had begun, and the first shot had been fired into a cup of tea. Most men would have dialed 911 the moment the toxicology report came back on that screen, but I am not most men. I spent 40 years in logistics managing the flow of millions of dollars of cargo. And if there is one thing I learned, it is that you never make a move until you see the full manifest I needed to know the scope of the damage before I declared war. So instead of calling the police, I closed my laptop and looked at my grandson Leo, who was watching me with eyes that had seen too much for an 8-year-old. I need to see where your father keeps his papers. Leo, I said, my voice low and steady. The house was dark and quiet, the silence heavy with the ghosts of the betrayal I had just uncovered. Leo nodded and slipped off the chair, his small bare feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. He led me down the hallway to the room at the end, the home office that Darius always kept locked. This room had been my study. Once it was where I planned the expansion of my investment portfolio, where I taught Darius how to play chess, but when I let him and Courtney move in to save money, I gave him this space, hoping he would use it to build a career instead. As I stood before the locked oak door, I realized I had given him a bunker to plot my destruction. I did not have the key, but I did not need one. I pulled a thin, stiff piece of wire from my pocket, a trick I learned from a warehouse foreman in '82 when we lost the keys to a container full of perishables inside. The lock clicked with a satisfying snap and the door creaked open. The smell hit me first. It was the scent of stale air, cheap cologne and desperation. The room was a mess. Papers were piled high on the desk. Empty takeout containers littered the floor. It was the chaotic nest of a man who was losing control. Leo walked straight to the large bookshelf behind the desk. He pushed aside a row of fake leather-bound books that I knew Darius had never read, revealing a wall safe. It was a digital model, the kind you buy at a hardware store. Thinking. It makes you a big shot. I stared at the keypad, thinking about dates. birthdays, anniversaries. I was about to try his birthday when Leo reached up. He did not hesitate. His small fingers punched in the numbers, 4091. I frowned, trying to place the significance, and then it hit me. April 9th, 2001, the day I bailed Darius out of jail for the first time when he was 19 and got caught joyriding in a stolen car. He used the date of his first failure as the code to hide his biggest ones. The light on the safe turned green and the heavy door swung open. I expected to find cash, maybe some jewelry instead. I found a graveyard of bad decisions. Stacks of paper were crammed inside, rubber banded together in chaotic bundles. I pulled out the first stack and felt my stomach drop. It was not just bad, it was catastrophic. Darius had been gambling, not just a little poker night with the boys, but high-stakes sports betting online. The printouts from DraftKings and offshore betting sites showed losses that made my head spin. $10,000 on a boxing match, $15,000 on a football game, all lost all in the last 6 months. But that was just the appetizer. Underneath the betting slips were the crypto trading records. I put on my reading glasses, my hand shaking slightly. Not from age, but from rage, he had bought into every scam, coin, and pump and dump scheme on the internet, putting in money he did not have, chasing a miracle that never came. The red ink on the ledger was bleeding off the page. Total losses in cryptocurrency trading amounted to over $200,000. "Where did you get this money, Darius?" I whispered to the empty room. I knew his salary at the car dealership barely covered his car payments. Then I found the answer in a black leather folder at the bottom of the stack. Inside was a loan agreement, but it was not from a bank. There was no logo, just a typed contract with brutal terms. $500,000 borrowed from an entity called the Omega Group. I knew that name on the streets. They were not bankers, they were loan sharks, the kind who broke legs for interest payments. The interest rate was staggering, 20% compounded weekly, and the collateral listed was my house. I felt the blood drain from my face. I unfolded the next document attached to the loan. It was a deed, a quitclaim deed, transferring the title of this house. The house I bought with my sweat and blood, the house where I raised him from my name to his name. Dated 6 months ago at the bottom was a signature that looked like mine, swirling and confident, but I knew I had never signed it. My own son had forged my signature to steal my home and then handed the deed over to criminals to cover his gambling debts. He had been living here playing the big shot, knowing that any day the thugs could come and kick us out onto the street, knowing that he had already lost the roof over his father's head. Leo was standing beside me looking at the papers. He did not understand the numbers, but he understood the shaking of my hands. He reached out and touched my arm, offering a silent comfort that I did not deserve. I had been so blind I thought I was helping them by letting them live here, rent-free. I thought I was giving them a leg up instead. I was financing their delusion. But why kill me? I thought stealing the house was one thing. But murder, surely if I died the house would be tied up in probate and the loan sharks would come anyway. Unless there was something else. Something that paid out immediately upon my death. I dug deeper into the safe, reaching into the very back. My fingers brushed against a thick envelope made of expensive, heavy paper. I pulled it out and my heart stopped beating for a second. It was a life insurance policy from a company I had never heard of. I opened it and the numbers screamed at me. $2 million. The policy insured the life of Isaiah Washington. The beneficiary was Darius Washington. The policy was dated just 30 days ago. Inside, there was a medical questionnaire filled out with lies stating I was in perfect health except for a minor heart condition meant to make the sudden death look plausible but not suspicious. And there it was again, my signature forged in blue ink right next to the clause that said, in the event of accidental death or sudden cardiac event, the payout is expedited within 48 hours. I dropped the paper on the desk as if it were burning hot. It all made sense. Now the timing of the cruise, the tea, the 2-week window. Darius did not just need the house, he needed cash to pay off the $500,000 debt to the Omega Group before they killed him. And he needed another $1.5 million to start his new life with Courtney. The plan was simple. Kill the old man, collect the $2 million, pay the sharks, and walk away. Rich and free. I looked at the date on the policy again. The waiting period for the policy to be active was exactly 30 days today, was day 31. They had waited until the policy was valid to the minute before they got on that boat and left me with the poison. I looked at Leo, who was staring at the insurance policy with a frown on his face. He pointed to a sticky note attached to the back of the folder. I turned it over in Darius S. handwriting, scrawled in a panic were the words, "Deadline Friday, or they break legs." Friday, that was in 3 days. The loan sharks were coming for him in 3 days. That is why he was so nervous at the door. That is why Courtney was so insistent about the tea. They were not just greedy, they were on a ticking clock, and they decided that my life was the only currency they had left to buy more time. I felt a cold calm settle over me, the kind of calm I used to feel when a storm was rolling in off the Atlantic and I had to secure the cargo on the docks. I was no longer a father, looking at his son, some mistakes. I was a man looking at an enemy who had targeted me for liquidation. Darius had made his choice. He had traded my life for a gambling debt. He had signed a contract with the devil and tried to pay it with my soul. I looked down at my grandson. "Listen to me. Leo," I said, my voice hard and flat. "Your father made a mess, a very big mess. He thinks I am going to die on Friday so he can get paid. But he forgot one thing." Leo looked up at me, his eyes wide, waiting. "He forgot that I am the one who taught him how to sign his name," I said, picking up the forged deed and the insurance policy. I folded them carefully and put them in my pocket. "I am not going to call the police. Leo, not yet, because if I call the police now your dad goes to jail, but the bad men still come for the house and we lose everything. No, we are going to do something smarter." I looked at the phone on the desk. I picked up the receiver and dialed the number of the only person I knew who could help me navigate a shark tank without getting eaten. My old lawyer, Saul Weiss. He was expensive, he was ruthless, and he hated Darius. "Saul," I said when he answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Wake up, I have a job for you and bring your checkbook. We are going to buy some debt." I looked around the office one last time at the fake life my son had built. I was about to burn it all down. But I was going to make sure that when the smoke cleared, Leo and I were the only ones left standing. The tea was in the trash, the papers were in my pocket, and the old Zeke Washington was back in business. The game had changed, and Darius was about to find out that he had bet against the house, and the house always wins. Acting was never my strong suit. I was a man of facts and figures, of shipping manifests and structural integrity. But that afternoon, sitting in my favorite armchair with the blinds drawn against the bright sunlight, I had to give the performance of a lifetime. I had spent the last hour preparing for this moment, not by memorizing lines but by diminishing myself. I had buttoned my shirt wrong. Skipping the second button to look disheveled, I had rubbed my eyes until they were red and irritated, and I had practiced a slight tremor in my right hand, the kind that rattles a teacup against a saucer. Leo sat on the floor near my feet playing with a set of wooden blocks. He was building a tower higher and higher, his movements precise and silent. He knew the plan. We had discussed it in whispers in the kitchen, like two resistance fighters in occupied territory, when the computer chimed, the sound echoing through the quiet house like a siren. Leo stiffened his back, went straight, but he did not look up. He retreated into that shell of silence that had protected him for 3 years. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump, letting my mouth hang open slightly, just a fraction of an inch to suggest a loss of muscle control. Then I clicked accept. The screen filled with blinding blue light. The connection was pixelated at first, freezing and stuttering before resolving into a picture of paradise. Behind them was the endless turquoise of the Caribbean ocean. The sun was shining so brightly it looked artificial, creating a halo around Courtney, S wide-brimmed straw hat. She looked radiant, glowing with health and the anticipation of wealth. "Hi, Dad," she chirped, her voice cutting through the speakers, with a delay that made everything feel disjointed. "Look at this view. Isn't it incredible? We just docked in Nassau." I squinted at the screen, leaning forward as if I was having trouble focusing. "Hello," I rasped, making sure my voice sounded dry, thin, like paper. "Courtney, is that you? The sun is so bright it hurts my eyes." "Perfect." Courtney beamed, and I saw her exchange a quick look with someone off screen. Darius leaned into the frame. He was wearing a floral shirt that cost more than my first car and holding a drink with a little umbrella in it. But unlike his wife, he looked terrible. His skin was clammy despite the heat, and his eyes were shifting, darting around the screen, unable to lock onto mine. "Hey, Pops," Darius said, his voice tight, barely a mumble. "How? Are you holding up everything okay at the house?" I let my hand tremble as I adjusted the laptop screen, making the image shake. Chaos creates unease, and I wanted them to feel uneasy. "I am feeling a little tired." "Son, Honestly, I said, letting a sigh escape that turned into a weak cough, just very tired. My chest feels heavy, like there is a weight sitting right here. I rubbed my sternum, watching Courtney's reaction like a hawk. She did not look concerned. She looked delighted. A small, satisfied smile played at the corners of her mouth, the kind a predator gets when the trap snaps shut. "That is normal, Dad," Courtney said, her voice soothing, but with an undercurrent of steel. "It is just your body relaxing. You have been so tense lately. Are you taking your medicine? Are you drinking the tea I made for you?" The tea. The weapon of choice. She could not wait to ask about it. I reached out of the frame and grabbed the empty mug I had prepared earlier. It was stained with the residue of the poison I had poured out. I held it up to the camera, my hand shaking violently so the ceramic clattered against the table surface. "Right here," I said, sounding confused. "I just finished it. It tastes bitter. Courtney, very bitter today." "It is supposed to be bitter." "Dad," she said, leaning closer to the camera, her face filling the screen, her eyes searching mine for signs of the end. "That is how you know the herbs are working. It cleanses the heart. You have to drink it all, every drop." "Did you drink it all?" "Dad, I drank it." I lied. Letting my head loll back against the headrest for a moment, closing my eyes as if keeping them open was too much effort. "I feel dizzy, though, very dizzy." "Is that normal?" Darius took a long swallow of his drink, almost draining the glass. "Look at him, Courtney. He looks bad. Maybe we should call Dr. Miller. Maybe we should come back." Courtney's hand shot out and gripped Darius' forearm, her nails digging into his skin. I saw him flinch hard. "Do not be silly, Darius," she hissed, though she kept her smile fixed for mine. "Benefit Dad is fine. It is just the adjustment period, right? Dad, you just need to sleep." "Sleep is the best medicine." I opened my eyes halfway. Looking at my son, I saw the terror in him, not for me but for himself. He was trapped between a murderous wife and a mountain of debt, and he was too weak to climb out of either hole. "I am okay, son," I whispered. "I think I will just take a nap." "A long nap." "Good," Courtney said, her voice sharp, decisive. "Put Leo on. I want to see him." I angled the laptop down towards the floor. Leo looked up, his face a mask of blank indifference. He waved one small hand at the camera, a mechanical motion void of affection. "Be a good boy, Leo," Courtney said, her voice dripping with that fake maternal affection that made my stomach turn. "Do not bother Grandpa. He needs his rest. Do not make any noise. You know what happens when you make noise, right?" Leo nodded slowly, staring into the lens. His face was stone, but under the table, out of the camera's view, his left hand was resting on my knee. And he made a perfect circle with his thumb and forefinger, the OK sign. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. It was a signal from my partner in the field, confirming that the target bought the lie, confirming that we were still in control. "Okay, we have to go to dinner now, Dad," Courtney said, pulling Darius back. "Go to sleep. Now, do not forget tomorrow's cup. Same time. Promise me." "I promise," I whispered, letting my eyes flutter closed. The connection cut. The screen went black, leaving me staring at my own reflection. The old man in the shirt, buttoned wrong. The victim. I sat there for a long moment, shaking off the performance. I sat up straight, buttoned my shirt correctly, and felt the cold anger rushing back into my veins like adrenaline. They were celebrating my death, sipping cocktails while they waited for my heart to stop beating. For a man who believed in family loyalty, witnessing this level of betrayal was like watching a church burn down. I looked down at Leo, who had already stopped playing with the blocks and was standing up watching me, his eyes asking a silent question. "They bought it, kid," I said, my voice returning to its normal deep rumble. "They think I am halfway to the grave." Leo let out a breath he didn't know he was holding and picked up the empty mug, walking it to the sink to wash it out. He was meticulous, wiping away every trace of the liquid, knowing instinctively that this was evidence that needed to be managed. I stood up, stretching my back, feeling the stiffness of the tension leave my muscles. I needed to strategize. I needed to call Weiss and finalize the purchase of the debt. I needed to secure the perimeter, but the war was coming to me faster than I anticipated. My personal cell phone, the one I kept in my pocket, buzzed against my thigh. It was a sharp, aggressive vibration, distinct from the gentle hum of a notification. It was a demand. I pulled it out the screen, glowing in the dim light of the living room. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize, an area code that belonged to a part of the city where police sirens were just background noise. We know the son is on a boat. We know the wife is with him. But we know you are home, old man. Friday is too far away. We are coming tonight to collect the interest. I stared at the words, the glowing blue letters burning into my retinas. They were watching the house. They knew Darius' schedule. They probably knew exactly which room I was standing in right now. The Omega Group, they were not waiting for the insurance payout. They smelled blood in the water, and they wanted a taste before the main course. I looked at the front door, the heavy oak that I thought was a barrier. It suddenly felt very thin, very fragile. "Leo," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "Go upstairs to my bedroom. Get into the closet and lock the door from the inside. Take your tablet, put on your headphones, and do not come out until I come get you. Do you understand?" Leo looked at the phone in my hand, then at the front door. He understood. He nodded once and ran for the stairs, his small feet thumping softly on the carpet steps. I waited until I heard the click of the bedroom lock upstairs. Then I walked to the front window and peered through the slat of the blinds. A black sedan was idling across the street, the engine running, the headlights off inside. I could see the glow of a cigarette ember. 2 shadows in the front seat. I turned off the living room lights, plunging the house into darkness. If they wanted to come for the interest, they were going to find out that the bank was closed and the vault was guarded. I walked to the hallway closet and reached up to the top shelf, pushing aside the winter coats and the old board games. My hand closed around the cold steel of my Colt, 1911. I pulled back the slide, checking the chamber. It was loaded clean and ready. "I am not Darius," I whispered to the darkness. "I do not hide, and I do not beg." I sat in the chair facing the door, the gun resting on the armrest, and waited for the knock. The knocking started at exactly 11:45 at night, and it was not the polite rap of a neighbor asking for sugar. It was a rhythmic, violent pounding that shook the frame of the heavy oak door, threatening to splinter the wood. It was the sound of men who were used to getting what they wanted through intimidation, and who did not care who heard them doing it. I stood in the hallway, listening to the echoes die away, only to be replaced by a voice, muffled but aggressive, shouting, "My son! His name, Darius! Come out here, you coward! We know you are in there. Open up or we kick it down." Upstairs, I heard the faint click of the closet lock engaging. Leo was safe. That was the only variable that mattered. Now the rest was just business. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I was wearing my old charcoal cardigan over a white t-shirt, and my reading glasses were perched on my nose. I did not look like a threat. I looked like exactly what they expected to find, a 72-year-old retiree who could be frightened into handing over his Social Security check. I walked to the door, my steps silent on the rug. I unlocked the deadbolt, the sound loud in the quiet house, and then before they could pound again, I swung the door wide open. 2 men stood on the porch, blinking in the sudden light from the foyer. They were young, maybe in their late 20s, dressed in the uniform of low-level enforcement leather jackets that were too tight, thick gold chains that were probably plated, and expressions that tried too hard to look mean. The one on the left was tall and wiry with a scar running through his eyebrow. The one on the right was shorter, heavier, built like a fire plug with knuckles that looked like they had been broken more than once. They looked at me, and for a second I saw the confusion on their faces. They were expecting Darius, a 36-year-old man. They could rough up instead. They found an old man looking at them with mild curiosity. "Where is Darius?" the tall one barked, trying to recover his momentum. "He is not here," I said, my voice calm, level, just a grandfather telling someone the time of day. "He is on a boat in the middle of the Caribbean, likely losing more money at the blackjack table, but you boys didn't. Come here for a travel update, did you?" The short one stepped forward, invading my personal space, smelling of stale tobacco and aggression. "We don't care about boats, old man. We are here to collect the interest on a loan. Your son owes $5,000 for this week's vig, and if he is not here, then you are going to pay it, or we are going to start taking things out of this house, starting with your teeth." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply stepped to the side and gestured into the living room with a sweep of my hand. "Well, you can't take anything standing on the porch," I said. "Come in, gentlemen. Wipe your feet, please. The rug is Persian." They exchanged a look, a mixture of suspicion and amusement. They thought I was senile, or perhaps just so terrified I was trying to appease them. They smirked, confident in their dominance, and walked past me into the house. I closed the door, gently locking it again. "Have a seat," I said, pointing to the 2 armchairs facing the sofa. "I will get us some water, you—" "Got cash?" "Old man?" the tall one asked, ignoring the chairs. "We don't want water. We want cash." "Sit down," I repeated, my voice dropping an octave, losing the polite edge and hitting that command tone I used to use when a crane operator was moving a 10-ton container over a busy dock. It caught them off guard. They sat. I walked to the kitchen, calmly, deliberately. I opened the fridge and took out a pitcher of ice water. I poured 3 glasses, placing them on a tray. Then I reached into the back of my waistband and pulled out my Colt 1911. It was a beautiful gun made in 1957, the steel polished to a mirror, shine the grip worn smooth by decades of my hand. It was heavy, cold, and absolutely lethal. I walked back into the living room, holding the tray in my left hand and the Colt in my right. The thug's eyes went wide. The short one started to reach for his jacket pocket. "I wouldn't," I said, placing the tray on the coffee table. Then I set the gun down right next to the water glasses with a heavy, metallic clunk. It sat there, gleaming under the lamplight. A third participant in the conversation. I sat down on the sofa opposite them, crossing my legs and adjusting my glasses. "Now," I said, picking up my water, "let's talk about the Omega Group." The mention of their organization's name froze them in place. The tall one narrowed his eyes. "Who are you, old man? How do you know that name? I know a lot of things." I took a sip of water, watching them over the rim of the glass. "I know that Tony Ranging is running the operation out of the back of a dry cleaner on 125th Street. I know that you two are collectors, which means you get paid a percentage of what you bring in. And I know that buying bad debt is a risky business model unless you have collateral." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, the gun just inches from my hand. "Here is the situation, boys. My son Darius is an idiot. He borrowed $500,000 from your boss at 20% interest. He forged a deed to my house to secure it. And he took out a life insurance policy on me to pay it off. He thinks I am going to die this week so he can cash out and pay you." The thugs looked at each other, stunned. They knew about the debt, but they clearly did not know about the murder plot. "That is cold," the short one muttered, staring at me. "It is business," I corrected him. "And that is why we are sitting here. Because I am a businessman too, and I see a problem with your collection strategy." I picked up the Colt, not pointing it at them, just holding it, checking the safety, admiring the weight. "If you try to hurt me or trash my house tonight, 2 things happen. 1, I shoot the first man who moves, and at this range I won't miss 2. Even if you kill me, the police investigation freezes my assets for months, maybe years. Tony doesn't get paid, you don't get your cut, and Darius stays on that boat drinking margaritas." I put the gun back down. "Or we do it my way." The tall one licked his lips, his eyes flicking between the gun and my face. What? "Your way." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a checkbook. It was not a personal checkbook with puppies or sunsets on it. It was a large, leather-bound corporate ledger binder. I opened it and clicked a gold pen. "I have a company," I said, writing the date in neat block letters. "It is called Zeke Holdings, LLC. You have never heard of it because I don't advertise, but Zeke Holdings specializes in acquiring distressed assets. I own apartment buildings, I own parking lots, and tonight I am looking to acquire a debt." I looked up at them. "I will buy Darius S. debt note from the Omega Group. I will pay the principal $500,000 plus a flat 10% finder S fee for the 2 of you. That is $50,000 cash split between you just for walking back to Tony and handing him a check." Silence hung in the room, thick and heavy. $50,000 was more than these guys made in a year, breaking kneecaps. I saw the greed warring with the suspicion. "Why would you do that?" the tall one asked. "Why pay for your son if he tried to kill you?" "Because I don't want Tony sending guys like you to my door every week," I said softly. "And because when I own the debt, I own Darius. When I hold the paper, I control his life, I can garnish his wages, I can seize his assets, I can put him in jail for fraud if I choose. I prefer to keep my family matters in-house." I tore the check out. It was written for $50,000 payable to cash a deposit on the deal. "Take this to Tony," I said, sliding the check across the table. "Tell him Zeke Washington wants to buy the paper. Tell him to look up Zeke Holdings and check the credit rating. He will see that I have the liquidity to clear the full $500,000 tomorrow morning." Wire transfer, clean and legal, no police, no heat, just money. The short one reached out and took the check. His fingers trembling slightly, he looked at the number of zeros. "Is this real?" he asked. "Call the bank in the morning," I said, standing up, signaling that the meeting was over. "Tell Tony I will expect a call by noon to finalize the transfer of the debt note if he agrees. You keep the 50 grand if he sends you back here again." Well, I picked up the Colt and racked the slide. The sound of a bullet chambering was loud and final. Then we skip the water and go straight to the noise. The two men stood up slowly, the arrogance completely gone from their posture. They looked at the gun, then at the check, then at me, with a newfound respect. They realized they had walked into a lioness den, expecting a lamb. "We will tell him," the tall one said, tucking the check into his pocket, safely. "We will tell him you are buying the debt." "Good." I walked them to the door, unlocking it. "And boys," I added as they stepped out into the cool night air, "tell Tony that if anyone comes near this house again before the deal is done, I will take it as a breach of contract, and I will spend that $500,000 hiring a private security team to hunt down every member of your little club. Do we understand each other?" "We understand," the short one said, nodding his head. They walked back to their car, moving faster than they had arrived. I watched them drive away, the taillights disappearing down the street. I closed the door and locked it, engaging the deadbolt and the chain. My legs suddenly felt weak, the adrenaline fading, leaving behind the exhaustion of a man who should be sleeping, not negotiating with gangsters. I leaned back against the door, closing my eyes. I had just spent $500,000 of my retirement money, but I had bought something more valuable than a house. I had bought control. I had bought time, and I had turned my son's creditors into my employees. I walked to the stairs and called up softly, "Leo, it is okay. You can come out now." The closet door clicked open upstairs, and I heard his small footsteps running to the landing. He looked down at me, his eyes wide, checking for blood. "Did the bad men hurt you?" "Grandpa?" he asked, signing the words as he spoke them, a habit, returning in his fear. "No, Leo," I said, climbing the stairs, one heavy step at a time, putting the gun back into my waistband. "The bad men work for us now. Go brush your teeth, kid. We have a busy day tomorrow. We have to buy a bank." Saul Weiss was the kind of lawyer who looked like he slept in a three-piece suit. He was 5'6", bald as a billiard ball, and possessed a mind that was sharper than the razor wire around a maximum security prison. I had known Saul for 30 years, since he helped me navigate the zoning laws for my first warehouse purchase. He was not cheap, he was not particularly friendly, but if you were in a foxhole, he was the only man you wanted, holding the map. He arrived at my house at 2 a.m. carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than Leo and a thermos of black coffee. He did not ask why I called him at such an ungodly hour. He simply walked in, looked at the gun on the table, looked at the terrified boy on the stairs, and then looked at me. "Talk," he said. Sitting down at the dining room table and opening his briefcase, I laid it all out for him. The toxicology report, the forged deed, the life insurance policy, the recording of Courtney and Darius plotting my murder, and the visit from the Omega Group. Thugs. Saul listened without blinking his face, a mask of stone. He did not gasp. He did not shake his head. He just absorbed the horror of my reality like a sponge absorbing dirty water. When I finished, he took a slow sip of his coffee and looked at Leo, who was sitting by my feet drawing on his tablet. "So," Saul said, his voice gravelly and low, "we have enough here to send them to prison for 20 years. Attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse, take your pick. I can call the district attorney right now and have a warrant issued by breakfast." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I do not want them arrested yet. Saul, if we arrest them now, they will claim it was a misunderstanding. They will hire expensive lawyers using my money to defend themselves, and the trial will drag on for years. Meanwhile, the loan sharks will burn this house down looking for their cash. I need a clean sweep. I need them to destroy themselves." Saul smiled, a thin, predatory smile that did not reach his eyes. "I thought you might say that you always were a logistics man. Zeke, you want to control the demolition." "Exactly," I said, leaning forward. "Here's what I want. I want to bait the trap. I want them to think they are winning until the moment the cell door shuts." Saul tapped his gold pen against the table rhythmically, thinking, calculating. "Okay, if we want to catch them red-handed, we need to give them exactly what they want. a helpless victim. They are expecting the poison to work slowly, simulating heart failure or a stroke. So let's give them a stroke. I frowned. You want me to fake a stroke? Not a full-blown one, Saul corrected me. Just the symptoms: confusion, memory loss, tremors, the early stages of dementia brought on by the toxicity. If they think you are losing your mind, they will get greedy. Greed makes people sloppy. Zeke, they will try to expedite the process instead of waiting for you to die. They will try to have you declared incompetent so they can seize control of your assets immediately. He pulled a fresh legal pad from his bag and started sketching a diagram. It is called a conservatorship trap, Saul explained. We let them file the papers. We let them bring in their corrupt doctors to certify that you are unfit. We let them stand in front of a judge or a notary and swear under penalty of perjury that you are gone. And then when they sign their names to the document taking control of your estate, that is when we drop the hammer. That is when we reveal the medical evidence that you are perfectly sane and that they have been poisoning you to induce the symptoms. It is the ultimate proof of malicious intent. I looked at the plan. It was dangerous. It required me to put my life in the hands of the people trying to end it, but it was brilliant. It would strip them of any defense they could, not claim it was an accident if they were actively maneuvering to steal my money while I was sick. But the money, I said, tapping the forged deed, even if we catch them, I need to protect the assets if something goes wrong, if they slip me a real dose while I am acting. That is step 2, Saul said, typing furiously on his laptop. We are going to move everything tonight. Right now, we are going to create an irrevocable grantor trust. We will name it the Leo Defense Fund. As of tonight, Isaiah Washington will own nothing, no house, no stocks, no cash. Everything will be owned by the trust, and you know who the trustee will be. He pointed the pen at himself. Me. I will be the gatekeeper. If they try to access your accounts with a power of attorney, it will be useless because the accounts will be empty if they try to sell the house. They cannot, because the title will belong to the trust. They will be stealing keys to an empty vault. I watched him work his fingers, flying across the keys, executing transactions that would usually take weeks in a matter of minutes. This was the power of money. This was the power of having the right friends. Saul was moving millions of dollars through secure channels, shielding my life as work behind layers of corporate armor. Leo tugged on my sleeve, interrupting my thoughts. I looked down at him. His eyes were filled with a panic I had not seen since the tea incident. He held up his tablet, and on the screen he had typed in big, bold letters. Please don't be sick. Grandpa, don't let them hurt you. My heart broke a little, looking at him. He was just a boy, and he had already lost so much. The idea of his grandfather, his only protector, becoming weak, even if it was fake, was terrifying to him. I picked him up and sat him on my lap. He was getting big, but tonight he felt small, light as a feather. Listen to me, Leo, I whispered, holding him close so he could feel the steady beat of my heart. I am not going to be sick. I am going to be acting. Do you know what acting is? It is like when we play cowboys and aliens. I pretend to be the alien, but I am still Grandpa. Leo looked at me skeptical. He reached out and touched my face, his small fingers tracing the lines around my eyes. But they will be here. He typed, his fingers moving fast. They are bad. Yes, they are bad, I admitted, but we are smarter. This is a trap. Leo, like in the cartoons when the roadrunner paints a tunnel on the wall and the coyote runs into it. We are painting a tunnel. We are going to make them think I am weak, so they run full speed into the wall. I looked over at Saul, who was watching us with a softened expression. Saul is building the wall, I told Leo, and I am the bait. You have the most important job of all. Leo, you have to be the lookout. You have to watch them when I cannot, because when I am pretending to be sick, I cannot break character. I need you to be my eyes and ears. Can you do that for me? Leo looked at Saul, then back at me. He took a deep breath, squared his small shoulders, and nodded firmly. He deleted the text on his tablet and typed a new word. Spy. I smiled, kissing his forehead exactly. You are my spy. Done, Saul announced, hitting the enter key with a flourish. The transfers are initiated. By the time the banks open in the morning, your personal accounts will show a balance of 0. The house title is already pending transfer into the trust. Let them come. Let them try to take it. They will be grabbing smoke. I felt a weight lift off my chest. The money was safe. That was the shield now. I had to forge the sword. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway again. I looked at myself. The strong jaw, the clear eyes, the posture of a man who had built an empire. I had to destroy this man. I had to become the shuffling, mumbling, confused old fool that Courtney wanted me to be. I let my shoulders collapse inward. I relaxed my facial muscles until my mouth hung slightly slack. I let a vacant look gloss over my eyes, focusing on nothing. Staring into the middle distance, I raised my hand and forced it to tremor, a rhythmic shaking that traveled up my arm. I practiced the voice, not my deep baritone, but a higher thinned-out rasp. "Who are you?" I muttered to the mirror. "Where is my wife? I want Ruth." It sounded pathetic, it sounded broken, it sounded perfect. Saul stood behind me, watching my transformation. "Impressive," he said quietly. "If I didn't know better, I would call an ambulance myself." "It is not acting, Saul," I said, dropping the character and turning to face him. My eyes hard again. "It is a preview of what they tried to do to me. They wanted to turn me into a vegetable so they could harvest me. Well, they are going to get the vegetable, but the roots are going to strangle them." Saul packed up his briefcase, checking his watch. It was nearly 4 a.m. "I will have the trust documents finalized and notarized by my staff. First thing," he said, "I will keep the originals in my safe. I am also going to alert a contact of mine at the precinct, a detective named Miller. He is a good man, hates domestic abuse cases. I will tell him to be on standby for a call from me." "Thank you, Saul," I said, shaking his hand. He paused at the door, looking back at me and Leo. "You know, Zeke," he said, his voice soft, "most clients come to me trying to save their money. You are the first one who came to me to save his dignity. Make sure you win this one, my friend, because if they realize you are faking—" I patted the Colt, 1911, that was now tucked back into the waistband of my trousers under my cardigan. "If they realize I am faking," I said grimly, "then the acting stops and the war starts for real." Saul nodded and disappeared into the night. I locked the door and turned to Leo. "Come on, spy time to get some sleep. The actors need their rest." As I walked up the stairs, holding my grandson's hand, I felt a strange sense of anticipation for the first time in my life. I was looking forward to seeing my son, not to hug him, but to destroy him. I was going to give the performance of a lifetime, and the ticket price was going to be everything they had. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on the most painful performance of my life. I had spent 40 years commanding boardrooms and shipping docks, standing tall and looking men in the eye. But today I had to shrink, I had to wither. I had to become the shell of a man that my daughter-in-law hoped to find. I had called in a favor from Dr. Bennett, my family physician for 30 years, a good man who had delivered Darius and treated Ruth until the end. He didn't ask questions when I told him I needed to lure my son back from the Caribbean. He simply called Darius and told him that my heart was failing and my mind was going with it. He told them I was refusing to go to the hospital and that I was asking for my wife. It worked faster than I expected. Greed has a way of speeding up travel plans. They cut their 2-week cruise short and flew back on day 12. Barely 48 hours after my call with Bennett, I lay on the sofa in the living room wrapped in an old Afghan blanket. Even though it was 70 degrees inside, I had let a 2-day stubble grow on my face, and I had practiced the vacant stare, the look of a man whose internal lights were flickering and about to go out. Leo was sitting on the floor near the fireplace, pretending to color, but his eyes were sharp, alert. He was my lookout, my little soldier in a war that was being fought with silence and deception. I heard the key turn in the lock. The sound was loud in the quiet house. Usually that sound meant family coming home, meant Sunday dinners and laughter. Today, it sounded like the click of a chamber being loaded. The door swung open and a gust of warm air and expensive perfume rushed in. Courtney entered first, her skin bronzed from the island sun, her hair bleached lighter by the salt water. She was dragging a Louis Vuitton carry-on and looking around the room with the frantic energy of a scavenger bird spotting a carcass. Darius followed her. He looked terrible. His tan couldn't hide the dark circles under his eyes or the way his hands shook as he set down the bags. He was a man being crushed by debt and guilt, a man walking to the gallows of his own making. "Dad," Courtney called out, her voice pitching up into that fake concern that made my skin crawl. "Dad, we are home. Dr. Bennett called us. Are you okay?" I did not answer. I stared at the dust motes dancing in a shaft of sunlight, letting my mouth hang slightly open. I let a little bit of drool gather at the corner of my lip. a detail that hurt my pride more than I can explain. But I needed to sell this. I needed them to believe I was broken. They rushed into the living room, stopping short when they saw me. I must have looked pathetic, a heap of old bones under a knitted blanket. "Staring at nothing, Pops," Darius whispered, dropping to his knees beside the sofa. "Pops, it is me, Darius." I slowly turned my head, keeping my neck stiff, my movements jerky. I let my eyes drift over his face, not locking onto his gaze, but looking through him, past him. "Who are you?" I rasped, my voice thin and reedy. Darius flinched as if I had slapped him. "Pops, come on. Stop playing. It is Darius, your son." I frowned, deepening the confusion on my face. I raised a trembling hand and pointed a finger at his chest. "Darius is a boy," I muttered. "He is at school. He is playing baseball." "You are not. Darius, you are old. Are you the mailman? Do you have my check?" I saw the tears well up in Darius' eyes, genuine tears born of shock and maybe a shred of remaining love. He grabbed my hand, squeezing it hard. "No, Dad, I am not the mailman. Look at me, please." I pulled my hand away as if his touch burned me. "I want Ruth," I whined, pitching my voice into a childlike demand. "Where is Ruth?" she said. "She was making stew. Tell her I am hungry." Courtney stepped forward, pushing Darius aside gently but firmly. She leaned over me, her face invading my vision. She smelled of coconut oil and betrayal. She stared into my eyes, examining my pupils, checking the color of my skin, looking for the signs of the poison she had planted. "Dad." "It is Courtney," she said, speaking slowly and loudly as if I were deaf. "Do you know who I am?" I looked at her blankly. Then a flicker of recognition passed over my face, not of her, but of the fear she inspired. "You are the lady," I whispered, shrinking back into the cushions. "The loud lady with the tea." "I don't want the tea. It tastes like pennies." Courtney straightened up, and a slow, cold smile spread across her face. She turned her back to me, facing Darius. But I could see her reflection in the mirror over the mantelpiece. She didn't look sad. She didn't look worried. She looked triumphant. She grabbed Darius by the arm and pulled him a few feet away, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. But I had spent a lifetime listening to the hum of machinery to detect faults. I could hear every word. "It worked, Darius," she hissed, the excitement vibrating in her tone. "Dr. Bennett was right. The toxicity has advanced faster than we thought. Look at him. He doesn't even know you. He thinks you are the mailman." Darius wiped his eyes, looking back at me with a mixture of horror and relief. "But Courtney, he is gone. I mean, his mind is just gone." "Exactly," Courtney said, and I saw her squeeze his arm hard, her nails digging in. "This is it, Darius. This is the miracle we needed. We don't need to wait for him to die to get the money. If he is mentally incompetent, we can file for emergency conservatorship. We can take control of his accounts tomorrow." Darius hesitated, looking at his feet. "But isn't that... Darius, stop it!" Courtney snapped, her voice cutting like a whip. "Do you want the Omega Group to break your legs? Do you want to go to jail? We need access to his liquid assets. Now, if he is incompetent, we become his legal guardians. We can liquidate the portfolio to pay for his care and pay off your debt in the process. It is the only way." I lay there listening to them discuss, stripping me of my rights, discussing my life as if I were already a piece of furniture to be auctioned off. It took every ounce of my willpower not to sit up and strangle them both. But I had to be the mailman, his confused customer. I had to be the victim. I started to cough, a wet hacking cough that shook my whole body. Leo, who had been watching silently from the corner, ran over with a glass of water. "Here, Grandpa," he said, his voice soft. I took the glass, my hand shaking violently, and as I brought it to my lips, I deliberately let it slip. Water splashed all over my chest and the blanket soaking me. I dropped the glass on the rug where it landed with a dull thud. "Oh no," I cried, looking at the mess, my lip trembling like a child. "I made a mess. Ruth will be mad." Leo patted my arm. "Don't worry, Grandpa. I will clean it up." Courtney watched this scene with pure calculation. She didn't offer to help. She didn't get a towel. She just nodded to herself, confirming that I was physically incapable as well as mentally gone. She pulled her phone out of her purse and walked toward the kitchen, dialing a number as she went. "Darius, stay with him. Keep him calm," she ordered. I am making the call. I strained my ears, listening to her voice drifting from the kitchen. Dr. Miller, she said, her tone shifting to professional and urgent. Yes, it is. Courtney Washington, we are back. Yes, he is. He is in a very bad state, severe cognitive decline. He doesn't recognize his son. Motor control is gone. Yes, exactly what we discussed. I need you to come over now, Dr. Miller. We need the evaluation done today. Yes, I have the paperwork ready for the court filing. Perfect. See you in 20 minutes. She hung up and walked back into the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood like the ticking of a clock. She put a hand on Darius' shoulder, squeezing it reassuringly. It is done, she said. Dr. Miller is on his way. He will certify that Dad is suffering from acute dementia, probably induced by age and underlying conditions. He will sign the affidavit of incompetence. Once we have that, we file it with the probate court first thing in the morning by noon tomorrow. We will have power of attorney over everything. Darius looked at me, sitting there wet and shivering in the summer heat. By noon tomorrow, he repeated, his voice hollow. Yes, Courtney said, kissing him on the cheek, and then, we are free. Baby. Then we can finally live the life we deserve. I closed my eyes, shutting out the sight of them. They thought the clock was ticking down for me. They thought they had won the race, but they didn't know that the racetrack had been rigged. Dr. Miller, the dirty doctor who sold diagnoses for cash, was coming to sign a piece of paper that would seal their fate. They were about to go on record legally and publicly swearing that I was insane based on a condition they had manufactured. I felt a small hand slip into mine under the wet blanket. I squeezed Leo's fingers. He squeezed back. 2 short pulses. The trap was set, the bait was taken, and the wolves were circling. I let out a long, low moan, throwing my head back against the cushion. Mailman, I yelled out, my voice cracking. I want to go home. Courtney laughed, a soft, cruel sound. You are home, Dad, she said, and soon this home will be ours. I kept my eyes closed, hiding the fire that was burning behind them. Tomorrow at noon, she said. Tomorrow at noon, everything would change, but not in the way she thought. Tomorrow at noon, the mailman was going to deliver a package they would never forget. Dr. Miller smelled like peppermint and stale cigarette smoke, a combination that reminded me of the cheap motels near the shipping docks where illicit deals were made. He walked into my living room carrying a battered leather medical bag that looked more like a prop than a tool of healing. He was a small man with nervous eyes that refused to stay still, flickering around the room, assessing the value of my furniture rather than the health of his patient. I lay on the sofa, letting my jaw go slack, watching him through half-closed lids. Courtney was hovering right behind him, her hands clasped together in a performance of anxiety that was worthy of an Oscar, but I could see the tension in her knuckles, the white-hot anticipation of the verdict she had paid for. He is right here, Dr. Courtney said, her voice hushed and tragic. He has been like this since we got back. He does not know what year it is. He thinks Darius is the mailman, and he keeps asking for his wife who passed away 3 years ago. Miller nodded, pulling a stethoscope from his bag without even warming it up. He pressed the cold metal disc against my chest right over my heart. He listened for maybe 3 seconds, not nearly enough time to detect an arrhythmia or a murmur, but plenty of time to pretend. Heart rate is elevated, Miller mumbled, retracting the instrument. Pupils are sluggish, responding to light. He pulled a small penlight from his pocket and flashed it in my eyes. I stared straight ahead, ignoring the beam, focusing on a water stain on the ceiling, letting my eyes water without blinking. Mr. Washington, Miller said loudly, speaking to me as if I were a toddler or a golden retriever. Can you hear me? Mr. Washington, can you tell me your name? I let a long, slow breath escape my lips, making a whistling sound through my nose. My name, I rasped, letting my voice crack. My name is... Captain. The ship is leaving. Where is the manifest? Courtney let out a dramatic sob, pressing her face into Darius' shoulder. See, she cried. He is talking about ships. He hasn't worked on the docks in 5 years. Miller made a show of writing something down on his clipboard, scratching the pen across the paper with aggressive strokes. Mr. Washington, Miller continued. Can you tell me what year it is? Who is the President of the United States? I turned my head slowly, looking at Darius, then at the doctor. I narrowed my eyes, mimicking the suspicion of the confused. It is 57, I whispered. Eisenhower. I like Ike. Tell him the cargo is safe. Darius looked away, unable to watch. He was weak, but he wasn't made of stone like his wife. Watching his father disintegrate, even if it was fake, was tearing at him. But he was too deep in the hole to stop it. Now he needed this diagnosis as much as Courtney did. He needed my mind to be gone, so his debts could vanish. Miller straightened up, snapping his clipboard shut with a finality that echoed in the silent room. "It is as you suspected, Mrs. Washington," he said, his tone grave but his eyes bored acute. "Rapid onset dementia, likely exacerbated by a series of mini-strokes, or TIA. It is not uncommon in men of his age and background. The stress on his heart has deprived the brain of oxygen, causing significant cognitive regression." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to sit up and break his nose for insulting my intelligence, and my heart implies mini-strokes, implies he was making it up as he went along. Justify the fee, Courtney had undoubtedly promised him. Is permanent? Courtney asked. Breathless. "I am afraid so," Miller lied smoothly. "At this stage, recovery is impossible. He requires 24-hour supervision. He is a danger to himself and others, legally speaking. He no longer has the capacity to make decisions regarding his health, his finances, or his estate." I saw Leo in the corner of the room, standing by the bookshelf, holding his favorite teddy bear, the one with the blue ribbon tied around its neck. He was hugging it tight to his chest, facing the doctor. The bear's left eye was a high-definition camera lens recording every word, every lie, every breach of ethics. "Good boy, Leo," I thought. "Keep the camera steady." Courtney nodded solemnly, hiding her triumph behind a tissue. "So what do we do?" "Doctor, I am going to sign the certificate of incapacity right now," Miller said, pulling a thick document from his bag. "This affidavit declares Mr. Isaiah Washington medically incompetent. It recommends the immediate transfer of guardianship and power of attorney to his next of kin. You need to file this with the probate court first thing tomorrow morning." He placed the paper on the coffee table right in front of my face. He uncapped a heavy fountain pen and signed his name with a flourish, stamping his medical license number underneath it. "There," he said, handing the paper to Courtney. "He is officially no longer in charge of his own life." Courtney took the paper, her hands trembling not with grief, but with greed. She stared at the signature like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you, doctor," she whispered. "Thank you for saving us." Saving him. Miller packed up his bag quickly. "Darius, walk me to my car. I need to give you the invoice for the consultation." I knew what that meant. The invoice would be a cash envelope handed over in the driveway. Hush money for a dirty deed. As they turned to leave, I knew I had to plant the seed. I had to make sure they didn't just put me in a home and sell the house quietly. I needed them to destroy the house. I needed them to act crazy, so that when the police came, they would look like the lunatics. I let out a low groan, sitting up slightly on the sofa and clutching the cushion. "The walls." I muttered loud enough for them to hear. "Not the bank. No. No banks." Courtney froze halfway to the door. She turned around slowly, her eyes sharpening. "What did you say, Dad?" she asked, stepping back toward me. I looked past her, staring at the wall near the fireplace. "The banks are thieves," I rambled, letting the spit gather at the corner of my mouth again. I hid it. I hid it all, in the walls. The basement walls, gold, bricks, safe. Darius stopped too, looking at me with a frown. "What is he talking about?" "He is delirious," Miller said dismissively, checking his watch. "Just synapses firing randomly. Ignore it." But Courtney did not ignore it. She walked right up to me, kneeling down so she was eye level, her predatory instincts fully activated. "Dad," she whispered, soft and urgent. "What is in the basement walls? What did you hide?" I leaned in close to her, smelling the greed on her breath. "The gold." I whispered, my eyes wide with fake secrets. 40 years, skimming the cargo, pure gold bars, behind the bricks. "Don't tell the tax man." "Shh." I put a finger to my lips and winked a clumsy, exaggerated wink before collapsing back onto the pillows, closing my eyes and feigning instant sleep. Courtney stood up slowly. She looked at the wall, then she looked at the floor as if she could see through the wood down to the basement foundation. "Did you hear that, Darius?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "He is crazy, Courtney," Darius said impatiently. "He is talking about Eisenhower. He doesn't have gold bars." "You don't know that," she snapped, turning on him. He worked in logistics for 40 years. He moved millions of dollars of freight cash commodities. Who knows what he took? He always said he didn't trust banks. Remember? He always paid for cars in cash. She looked back at me, sleeping peacefully on the sofa. Gold, she murmured, licking her lips. Bricks of gold. Miller cleared his throat. Look, I really need to get going. Go. Courtney waved a hand at him, dismissing him. Darius, pay the man and get him out of here. Darius led the doctor out, but Courtney stayed. She stood in the middle of the living room, turning slowly, looking at the walls, looking at the plaster and the paint, as if calculating how thick they were, as if wondering where a sledgehammer might make the first dent. I lay there, keeping my breathing shallow and even listening to the gears turning in her head. I had just given a drug addict the promise of a fix. I had given a greedy woman the promise of buried treasure. She thought I was insane. She thought she had the legal power to do whatever she wanted with my house. Well, she was about to use that power to tear it apart with her bare hands. I heard her footsteps walk softly to the basement door. I heard the handle turn. I heard the creak of the hinges as she opened it, staring down into the dark. Leo walked over to the sofa. Silently, he placed the teddy bear on the table facing the basement door. Then he sat on the rug beside me and tapped my hand 3 times. I opened one eye, just a crack, and winked at him. The bait was bait. Taken, the hook was set now. All we had to do was wait for them to start swinging the hammers. The sound of a sledgehammer hitting concrete is distinct. It is a dull, heavy thud that travels through the framework of a house, vibrating in the floorboards and settling in your teeth. I lay in my bed upstairs, listening to the demolition of my own home, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly in the dark beneath me in the basement. My son and his wife were sweating and cursing, tearing down a perfectly good wall because I had whispered a lie about gold bars. I checked my watch. It was 2 a.m. Most people are asleep at 2 a.m, but greed is a powerful stimulant. It keeps you awake better than caffeine. It overrides exhaustion, and it certainly overrides common sense. Courtney and Darius had been down there for 3 hours hunting for a treasure that did not exist. Chasing a ghost I had conjured up to keep them busy. I could hear their voices drifting up through the heating vents, distorted and metallic. Courtney sounded manic, her voice pitched high and tight. Keep digging, Darius, she was saying. It has to be behind the structural wall, he said, deep behind the bricks. Don't stop now. I heard the clang of metal on stone, followed by Darius groaning. Courtney, my hands are blistered. We have been at this for hours. Maybe he was just talking crazy. Maybe there is no gold. You heard him. Courtney snapped, and I could picture her face covered in drywall dust, eyes wild with gold fever. He was lucid for a second. He was whispering a secret. People don't lie about hidden treasure when they are dying, Darius. This is millions of dollars. Keep swinging. I rolled over, pulling the duvet up to my chin, hiding a smile that felt cold and hard on my face. Let them dig. Let them exhaust themselves. Let them tear up the foundation until they realized they were the ones standing on unstable ground. But I wasn't the only one awake. Leo had slipped out of the room about 20 minutes ago. I had tried to stop him, to signal him to stay put, but the boy had a look in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. It was a look of determination bordering on vengeance. He had taken his teddy bear, the one with the camera, and crept down the hallway, his small bare feet silent on the carpet. I lay there tense, straining my ears, hoping he wouldn't get caught, wondering what he was doing. I trusted him. He was smart, smarter than his father ever was, but he was still only 8 years old, and he was walking into a den of wolves. Down in the basement, the atmosphere was thick with dust and resentment. Leo stood in the shadows near the washing machine, watching his parents destroy the wall. A pile of broken bricks and shattered drywall lay at their feet. Darius was shirtless, sweat pouring down his back, swinging the sledgehammer with the clumsy desperation of a man who had never done a day of manual labor in his life. Courtney stood behind him, holding a flashlight like a prison warden, pointing out where to strike next. Leo stepped forward, clutching his bear. He made a soft sound in his throat, a little grunt to get their attention. Courtney spun around the beam of the flashlight, blinding him for a second. "What are you doing down here?" she hissed. "Get back to bed." Leo didn't move. He raised one hand and pointed a trembling finger toward a section of the wall near the water heater, a spot where the mortar looked old and crumbling. He opened his mouth and made a series of urgent, desperate sounds, pointing repeatedly at a single loose brick. "What?" Darius stopped, wiping his forehead, breathing heavy. "What does he want?" Courtney lowered the light, looking from Leo to the wall. "He is pointing at something." she muttered. Maybe he saw the old man hide it. Maybe he knows. She rushed over to the wall, grabbing a chisel, jamming it into the crack Leo had pointed out. She pried it open with savage force, and the brick came loose, sliding out with a scrape of stone on stone. She dropped the flashlight and reached into the dark hole, her arm disappearing up to the elbow. She was expecting to feel the cold, smooth surface of a gold bar. She was expecting salvation. Instead, her hand brushed against insulation and cobwebs she felt around, frantically scratching her skin on the rough concrete, searching for a fortune that wasn't there. Nothing, she screamed, pulling her arm out, her fingernail, torn, bleeding slightly. Nothing, it is just dirt. She turned on Leo, her face contorted into a mask of pure, ugly fury. "You little freak," she shrieked. "You think this is funny?" Leo stood his ground, staring up at her with those big dark eyes that judged her. "You are useless," Courtney spat, stepping toward him, looming over him just like your dust. "Grandfather, a useless, mute waste of space. Get out of my sight before I really give you something to cry about." She shoved him hard. It wasn't a playful push. It was a shove meant to hurt. Leo stumbled back, tripping over a pile of debris and landing hard on his elbows, scraping the skin. "Hey," Darius said weakly, stepping forward. "That is enough, Courtney." "Shut up, Darius," she screamed, spinning on him. "Shut up and keep digging. It has to be here somewhere." Leo didn't cry. He picked himself up, dusting off his pajamas. He looked at his mother one last time, capturing that image of her hatred, and then he turned and walked toward the stairs. But he didn't go up. Not immediately. I heard the footsteps pause at the bottom of the landing. I heard the faint click of the pantry door, which was right next to the basement stairs. I heard a soft glug-glug sound, the sound of thick liquid being poured. Leo had grabbed the bottle of vegetable oil from the pantry shelf, the large economy-sized jug we used for frying chicken. He was pouring it quietly, methodically onto the wooden steps of the basement staircase, coating the middle treads in a slick, invisible layer of grease. He wasn't just a spy anymore, he was a soldier, laying a minefield. He slipped past the oil, carefully stepping on the edges of the stairs where he hadn't poured, and crept back up to the hallway, sneaking into his room and locking the door. Downstairs, the digging continued for another 20 minutes, until finally exhaustion overtook greed. "This is useless," Darius shouted. Throwing the hammer down, it clanged loudly against the concrete floor. "I am done, Courtney. My back is broken. There is nothing here. He is just a senile old man rambling about nonsense." Courtney let out a scream of frustration, a primal sound that echoed up the vents. "Fine," she yelled, "fine. We stop for tonight, but tomorrow we tear down the other wall." I heard their heavy footsteps tramping toward the stairs. Darius went first, trudging up heavily, too tired to lift his feet properly. He stepped on the oil, slipped slightly, but managed to grab the railing, his weight pulling him forward, stumbling up the last few steps. "What the hell?" he muttered, looking at his shoe as something leaking. "Move!" Courtney snapped from behind him, shoving past him. "I need a drink and I need to wash this filth off me." She hit the third step with the confidence of entitlement. Her foot planted firmly on the center of the tread, right where the pool of oil was thickest. Physics is a judge that cannot be bribed. Friction is a law that cannot be broken. Her foot shot out from under her faster than a blink. She didn't even have time to scream before gravity took hold. Her legs went up, her arms flailed, grabbing at empty air, and she came down hard, face first against the edge of the wooden step. The sound was sickening, a wet crunch of cartilage against timber followed by the heavy thud of her body sliding down to the concrete floor. Silence hung in the house for exactly 1 second, then screaming started. It wasn't a scream of fear, it was a scream of vanity and pain mixed together, a high-pitched wail that sounded like a siren. "My nose," she screamed, "my nose." "Oh God, blood! Look at the blood." I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in days, I felt a genuine smile touch my lips. I didn't move. I didn't rush down to help. I stayed right where I was, the confused old man sleeping through the chaos. Darius was shouting, running back down the stairs. "Courtney, are you okay?" "Oh God, your face." "You idiot," she shrieked, her voice gargling slightly. "Get me a towel. Don't just stand there. Look at what this house did to me. Look at what he did to me." "He didn't do anything." Darius stammered. You slipped. I slipped on something, she yelled, spitting blood. It is oil. There is oil on the stairs. Who put oil on the stairs? Silence again as the realization hit them. I was in bed asleep. I couldn't walk without shaking. Leo was a child asleep in his room. It is this house, she sobbed. This cursed, rotting house. It is trying to kill me. I hate it. I hate him. I heard them coming up the stairs slowly this time, Courtney sobbing and cursing Darius trying to support her. They went into the bathroom and I heard the water running, heard the panic as they assessed the damage. I slipped out of bed and crept to my door, opening it just a crack to peek into the hallway. Courtney came out of the bathroom holding a bloody towel to her face. Her eyes were already swelling, turning black and purple. The bridge of her nose was clearly broken, crooked and angry. She looked like a monster, her face matching the ugliness of her soul. She looked at Darius, her voice muffled by the towel but deadly serious. That is it, she said. No more, waiting, no more, digging for gold. We are done playing games. What do you mean? Darius asked, his face pale. Tomorrow morning, she hissed, eyes narrowing into slits. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., we call the ambulance. We are getting him declared incompetent and we are moving him to the state facility immediately. I don't care if the paperwork isn't perfect. I don't care about the gold. I want him out of this house so I can burn it down and sell the land. But the court date isn't until next week. Darius argued. I don't care, Courtney screamed, wincing at the pain in her face. We call Dr. Miller back. Tell him to sedate the old man. Tell him Zeke is violent. Tell him he attacked me. Tell him he pushed me down the stairs. Darius' eyes went wide. Lie to the police. Look at my face. Darius, she pointed to her broken nose. This is proof he is dangerous. He is violent, and dementia patients get violent. We are sending him away tomorrow, and once he is locked up in the ward under sedation, he will never talk again. We sell the house, pay off the sharks, and we are done. She turned and limped into the bedroom, slamming the door. I stood in the darkness of my room, my heart pounding slow and steady. They were escalating the timeline. They were going to accuse me of violence to speed up the process. They were going to use her injury, an injury caused by her own cruelty and my grandson's quick thinking as a weapon against me. I closed my door silently and went to the window, looking out at the street where the shadows of the night seemed to be waiting. Leo had drawn first blood, but now the enemy was desperate, and a desperate enemy makes mistakes. I picked up my phone and sent a text message to Saul Weiss, code red. They are moving up the timeline. Accusation of violence imminent. Be ready at 8 a.m. I put the phone down and looked at the picture of Ruth on my nightstand. Don't worry, honey, I whispered, touching the frame. They want to see violence. Well, tomorrow, I am going to show them what it looks like when a storm hits land. The morning sun was too bright and the world was too loud, but I had to keep my eyes half closed and my mouth slightly open, playing the part of the confused geriatric while my heart pounded with the rhythm of a war drum inside my chest. We were in the car. Darius was driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Courtney sat in the passenger seat, adjusting the large white bandage taped across the bridge of her nose. She looked like a raccoon, her eyes surrounded by blooming purple bruises that were turning a sickly shade of yellow at the edges every time the car hit a pothole. She hissed in pain and shot a look of pure venom into the rearview mirror at me. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window at the passing strip malls and fast food joints, letting my head bob with the motion of the car. I was not Zeke Washington, the logistics tycoon today. I was just cargo a package to be delivered, signed, and discarded. We pulled up to a low brick building nestled between a dry cleaner and a discount liquor store. The sign above the door read, Law Offices of Barry J. Stone, Personal Injury and Estate Planning. Even from the parking lot, I could smell the desperation. Barry Stone was not Saul Weiss. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to hide assets or screw over a business partner quickly and cheaply. Come on, Dad, get out, Courtney snapped. Opening my door, she grabbed my arm, her grip unnecessarily tight, her fingernails digging into my bicep through my sweater. She was in a hurry. The pain in her face was making her sloppy, making her meaner than usual. I stumbled, getting out, dragging my feet, shuffling across the pavement like I had forgotten how knees worked. Darius walked on my other side, guiding me but not touching me. He couldn't look. At me, he kept his eyes on the ground, ashamed of what he was doing, but too terrified of his wife and his debts to stop it. Inside the office smelled of stale coffee and photocopier toner. The carpet was thin and stained, and the receptionist didn't even look up from her phone as we walked past. Barry Stone was waiting for us in a conference room that was barely big enough for the table. He was a sweaty man with a comb-over that wasn't fooling anyone and a suit that shined under the fluorescent lights. He had a stack of documents in front of him, thick piles of paper that represented my life's work, my properties, my stocks, my legacy, all reduced to legal jargon ready to be stolen. "Ah," Mr. Washington Stone said, standing up and extending a damp hand. "Good to see you. Sit down, sit down. We have a lot to get through." I stared at his hand like it was a dead fish, ignoring it and collapsing into the chair, staring blankly at the wall behind him where a cheap framed diploma hung slightly crooked. "He is not." "Very lucid today," Courtney said, sitting down and gingerly touching her nose. "Dr. Miller said the dementia is advancing rapidly, so we need to get these voluntary transfer forms signed while he still has moments of clarity." Stone nodded, tapping a pen against the desk. "Strictly a formality. Mrs. Washington, as long as he can hold a pen and make a mark, we can witness it as a voluntary act to avoid the lengthy probate court process. It is better for everyone, really ensures the estate is managed properly for his care. For his care." I wanted to laugh. For his care meant for their debts, for their vacations, for the hole they had dug themselves into. Stone pushed the first document toward me. It was a general durable power of attorney, granting Darius and Courtney full unrestricted access to all my bank accounts and real estate holdings. Darius leaned in close, his breath smelling of mints he was using to cover up the smell of last night's whiskey. "Hey, Pops," he said, his voice pitching up high and condescending, the way you talk to a toddler or a dog. "Look here. Look at the paper." I slowly turned my head, blinking my eyes out of sync, looking at him with a vacant expression. "Paper?" I mumbled, dragging the word out. "Paper." "Yeah, it is just some paperwork for the house," Darius said, pointing to the signature line. "Right here, Pops, you just need to sign your name. Zeke Washington. Just like you used to teach me. Remember, just sign here and then we can go get ice cream." I froze internally. Ice cream. He was bribing me with ice cream. He was asking me to sign away millions of dollars to sign away my dignity, and his offer was a scoop of vanilla. I looked at my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the man I had bailed out of jail, and I saw a stranger, a weak, pathetic stranger who thought a sugar cone was the price of a father's love. "Ice cream," I repeated, letting a drool of anticipation slip from my lip. "Chocolate." "Yes, chocolate," Darius said, eager, now pushing the pen into my hand. "Whatever you want. Pops, big chocolate sundae. Just sign the paper first." I took the pen, my hand shaking violently. I held it like a dagger, making a fist around the barrel instead of holding it properly. Courtney watched me, her eyes narrowing, her patience fraying like an old rope. "Just sign it," she hissed through her bandages. "Stop shaking and sign it." I lowered the pen to the paper, the tip hovering over the line meant for my signature, keeping the tip moving, making frantic little circles in the air. I forgot, I stammered. "I forgot the letters." "You didn't forget," Courtney snapped, slamming her hand on the table, making Stone jump. "Write your name. Zeke, write it." I looked at her, fear in my eyes, but calculation in my soul. I pressed the pen down hard on the paper, tearing through the top layer slightly. I started to draw. Not letters, not my name. I drew a big, shaky circle, taking up the entire bottom half of the page, covering the signature line and the notary block. "What is he doing?" Stone asked, craning his neck. I drew 2 dots inside the circle, eyes, then I drew a long, curved line, a smile, a big, goofy, lopsided smiley face staring up at them from the legal document that was supposed to destroy me. I sat back, dropping the pen and clapping my hands together. "Happy face," I announced, giggling a dry, wheezing giggle. "Happy man likes ice cream." Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Stone looked at the paper, then at Courtney, Mrs. Washington. "I cannot accept a smiley face as a legal signature." Courtney stared at the drawing, her face turning a deep shade of crimson that matched the blood dried on her bandage. She began to shake, a low growl rising in her throat. She had reached her breaking point. The pain in her nose, the frustration of the gold hunt, the stress of the debt, and now this final mockery. It was too much. She lunged across the table, grabbing my wrist, her fingernails clawing into my skin. She didn't care about the lawyer. She didn't care about Darius. She just wanted to hurt me. "You senile old fool," she screamed, shaking my arm violently. Stop playing games. Sign the paper. Sign it right now, or I swear to God I will leave you in a gutter." "Courtney, stop!" Darius yelled, half standing up. She raised her other hand and slapped me hard on the back of my hand. The sound was loud, a sharp crack of skin on skin. It stung, but I didn't pull away. I stared at her, letting the shock register on my face, letting the lawyer see the violence. "You are useless," she shrieked, slapping my hand. Again, knocking the pen onto the floor. Useless, useless, useless. I sat there enduring the blows, feeling the sting, but feeling something else too. Victory. She had crossed the line. She had assaulted a helpless elderly man in front of a witness. Courtney stopped, breathing heavy, realizing what she had done. She looked at Stone, who was staring at her with his mouth open, holding his hands up as if to ward off a blow. She stammered, pulling back. "He is just being difficult." I leaned forward slowly, the vacant look vanishing from my eyes for just a nanosecond, the tremor in my hands ceasing instantly. I looked straight into her bruised, swollen face, my eyes locking onto hers with the intensity of a sniper. I lowered my voice to a whisper, barely audible but clear as crystal, cutting through the air like a razor blade. "Hit harder, sweetheart," I whispered. "The security camera in the corner is recording everything." Courtney froze. She went absolutely still, as if turned to stone. Her eyes darted to the upper corner of the room where a small black dome sat, blinking a tiny red light. She looked back at me, but the lucid Zeke was gone. I was back to being the confused old man, rubbing my hand and whimpering. "Bad lady," I whined, tears welling up in my eyes. "Bad lady, hit me. I want Darius." Courtney stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She wasn't sure if she had heard me or if her own guilt was hallucinating voices. Did he just speak? She thought I could see the panic rising in her chest. "What did you say?" she whispered, horror dawning on her. "I want ice cream," I cried louder now, looking at Darius. "My hand hurts." "Daddy, my hand hurts." Darius rushed over, pushing Courtney away. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted at his wife. "Are you crazy? You can't hit him. Look at Mr. Stone." Mr. Stone was already gathering his papers, his face pale. "Look, folks, this is too volatile. I cannot be a party to this if there is a question of coercion or abuse. I have a license to protect. Get him out of here." Courtney was still staring at me, searching for the man who had whispered to her, searching for the threat. But I was just an old man, crying for ice cream. She shook her head, dismissing the moment as paranoia. It must have been the painkiller she was taking for her nose. It must have been the stress. He didn't say that. He couldn't have said that. "We are leaving," she said, her voice hollow. "Let's go, Darius. We will let the court handle it tomorrow." She grabbed her purse and walked out. Not waiting for us, she walked fast, trying to outrun the feeling that she was being watched, trying to outrun the ghost in the machine. Darius helped me up, his touch gentle, now guilty. "I am sorry, Pops," he whispered. "I am so sorry. No ice cream today. Let's just go home." I shuffled out of the office, clutching my bruised hand to my chest. Inside, I was smiling. The smiley face on the ruined contract was my signature. After all, it was the signature of a man who knew he had just won the round. As we walked past the reception desk, I glanced up at the security camera and gave a tiny, imperceptible nod. Gotcha, I thought. They were taking me home to wait for the court hearing, but they didn't know that the verdict had already been delivered in that room. The tape was rolling, the witness was watching, and the bad lady had just handed me the weapon I needed to finish her off. The house was silent, but it was the silence of a bomb waiting to detonate. I sat in my bedroom, staring at the bruise on my hand where Courtney had slapped me earlier that day. The skin was turning a dark, ugly purple, a physical reminder that the lines of civility had been erased. We were no longer a family. We were hunter and prey. And tonight the hunter was desperate. I knew they were talking downstairs. I could feel the vibrations of their voices rising through the floorboards, frantic and sharp. Courtney had failed to get the signature that would have handed her my life on a silver platter, my smiley face on the contract had humiliated her, and humiliation is gasoline to a narcissist. She was burning with it, and she would not wait for the courts to open tomorrow. She needed a solution. Tonight, I checked the time. It was 10:30. Usually the time I would be asleep, but sleep was a luxury I could not afford. I was waiting for a signal earlier that evening while Darius was distracted unloading the groceries. I had slipped Leo a burner phone, a cheap prepaid smartphone I had bought weeks ago and hidden in my sock drawer. I showed him how to use the encrypted messaging app and told him one thing: if you hear them talk about hurting me, you text me the code words. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed under my pajamas, waiting for the phone to buzz. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm, the rhythm of a man checking the rigging before a storm. Downstairs, the conversation was moving from the kitchen to the master bedroom. Leo had told me earlier via text that he was going to play hide and seek. He had slipped under the bed in the guest room where Darius and Courtney were sleeping temporarily while the master suite was being renovated. He was lying in the dust, holding his breath, listening to his parents decide his grandfather's fate. My phone vibrated against my thigh, a short, sharp buzz that felt like an electric shock. I pulled it out, shielding the screen light with my hand. There were 3 words on the screen, glowing in the darkness. Code red, tonight. I stared at the message, feeling a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Code red meant imminent danger, meant they were done waiting, meant they were escalating to the final solution. A second message popped up a few seconds later, typed with the frantic speed of terrified fingers. Mommy said triple dose. She said accident. She said insurance. Money is faster than court. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the reality wash over me. My son, the boy I had taught to fish, the boy I had held when he scraped his knees, was downstairs right now, agreeing to murder his father for an insurance payout. He wasn't stopping her. He wasn't calling the police. He was nodding along, letting his wife mix a cocktail of death because he was too weak to face his debts. I put the phone away and stood up, moving quickly and quietly. I had prepared for this. I had expected this. I went to the small bathroom attached to my room and pulled a small plastic bag from my toiletry kit. It was a heavy-duty Ziploc bag, the kind used for freezing meat. I tucked it inside the collar of my pajama shirt, taping it securely to my chest so the opening sat right below my chin, hidden by the loose fabric. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small white tablet. It looked like an aspirin, but it wasn't. It was a theatrical prop, a foaming agent used by actors to simulate seizures or rabies. I had acquired it from a contact in the entertainment industry years ago, a leftover from a Halloween party, but tonight it was my shield. I placed the tablet on the nightstand under a tissue ready to hand. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy, purposeful steps. It was Courtney. I could tell by the cadence, sharp and aggressive. She wasn't walking like a daughter-in-law bringing warm milk. She was walking like an executioner. I scrambled back into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, messing up my hair, making sure my glasses were askew. I let my mouth hang open, resuming the character of the confused invalid. The door creaked open, slicing a wedge of hallway light across the room. Courtney stood there holding a steaming mug. Her face was still swollen from the broken nose, the bandages stark white against her bruised skin. She looked like a battered prize fighter who had decided to fight Dirty Dad. She whispered, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that made my stomach turn. "Are you awake?" I groaned, shifting under the covers, turning my head slowly toward her. "Ruth," I mumbled. "Is that you?" "No, Dad." "It is, Courtney." She walked into the room, closing the door behind her, shutting us in. "I brought you your special tea. You missed it last night, and Dr. Miller said it is very important you keep your schedule, especially with your confusion today." She sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under her weight. She held the mug out, the steam rising in the dim light, carrying that metallic, earthy smell of poison. "Drink up," she said, smiling with her split lip. "It will help you sleep. It will make all the pain go away." I looked at the mug, then at her eyes. There was no hesitation in them, no remorse, just a flat, cold calculation. She was watching me like I was a ledger that needed to be balanced. I sat up slowly, my hands trembling violently. I reached for the mug, letting my fingers brush against hers. Her skin was cold, clammy. "Help me," I whispered. "My hands are shaking." Courtney sighed an impatient sound. "Here, let me help you." She lifted the mug to my lips, tilting it aggressively, forcing the hot liquid into my mouth. This was the moment. This was the gamble. I took a large mouthful, the hot liquid burning my tongue, but I didn't swallow. I held it in my cheeks, letting my head loll forward, as if I was too weak to hold it up. Oops, I mumbled, pulling away, spilling a bit on my chin. Courtney hissed, wiping my face with the sheet. Be careful, Dad. You need to drink all of it, every drop. I coughed, turning my head away into my shoulder, burying my face in the collar of my pajama shirt. And in that split second of concealment, I spat the mouthful of tea into the open plastic bag taped to my chest. I did it again and again, a macabre dance of sip and spit. Courtney was too focused on the level of liquid in the cup going down to notice that my throat wasn't moving to swallow. She was too eager to finish the job. Almost done. She encouraged her voice tight, just a little more. I finished the last imaginary swallow and let my head drop back against the pillow, panting as if the effort had exhausted me. Good boy, she whispered, setting the empty mug on the nightstand. Now go to sleep. Dad, go to sleep and don't worry about anything. The house will be taken care of. She stood up, looking down at me for a long moment. I watched her through my eyelashes, wondering if she felt anything at all for the man who had welcomed her into his family, who had paid for her wedding, who had held her son. She reached out and turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Goodbye, Zeke, she whispered. Not Dad, not Pops, just Zeke, the name on the insurance policy. She walked out, closing the door softly. I heard the lock click from the outside. She had locked me in to die. I waited, counting the seconds in my head. I heard her footsteps go back downstairs. I heard the murmur of voices, Darius asking, "Is it done?" and her replying, "Yes, now we wait." I sat up in the dark, carefully peeling the bag of tea from my chest. I sealed it tight, checking for leaks. This was the murder weapon, liquid proof that they had tried to kill me. I hid the bag inside my pillowcase, deep in the stuffing. Then I took the foaming tablet from under the tissue and popped it into my mouth, tucking it under my tongue. I didn't bite down yet. I needed to time this perfectly. I grabbed my phone and texted Saul Weiss. They dosed me. I have the sample. Police on standby. Give me 20 minutes, then send the cavalry. Saul replied instantly. Understood. Hold the line, Zeke. I lay back down, staring at the dark ceiling, the taste of the undissolved tablet chalky in my mouth. 20 minutes. I had to wait 20 minutes to let them think the poison was working, to let them get comfortable with the idea that they were rich. I thought about Leo huddled under the bed downstairs, terrified. I hoped he stayed put. I hoped he knew how brave he was. 10 minutes passed. Silence in the house. The silence of a grave. 15 minutes. I heard footsteps again, slower this time. Hesitant. It was Darius coming to check the body, coming to see if his father was dead so he could call the paramedics and put on his performance of grief. I bit down on the tablet. It fizzed instantly, filling my mouth with a thick, acrid foam. I let it bubble up, filling my cheeks, spilling out over my lips. I started to convulse, shaking my body rhythmically, thrashing my legs against the mattress, hitting my arm against the nightstand, knocking the lamp over with a crash. The door handle jiggled. Locked, Dad. Darius' voice muffled. Panicked, Dad. Are you okay? I let out a gargled, choking sound, a sound of a man drowning in his own fluids. Courtney's voice joined him, sharp and angry. He is seizing. It is working. Don't open it yet. Let him finish. No, he sounds like he is in pain. Darius yelled, rattling the door. Wait! Courtney screamed. Wait 5 minutes! I thrashed harder, throwing my body off the bed, landing on the floor with a heavy thud. I kicked the door from the inside, creating a chaotic, terrifying noise. Darius couldn't take it. I heard a loud crack as he kicked the door open, breaking the lock. He wasn't trying to save me. He was just panicked by the noise, terrified that the neighbors would hear. The hallway light flooded into the room, illuminating the scene. I lay on the rug, my body twisted. My eyes rolled back in my head, white foam pouring from my mouth, bubbling down my chin onto the carpet. I was convulsing, jerking my limbs in a grotesque parody of death. Darius stood in the doorway, his face gray, his hands over his mouth. Oh God, oh God. Courtney, look. Courtney pushed past him, staring down at me, not with horror but with clinical detachment. It is the heart, she said coolly. The digoxin causes fibrillation. This is it. Check his pulse. Darius knelt down beside me, reaching for my wrist. His hand was shaking so bad he couldn't find a vein. I can't find it. I can't feel anything. I think he is dying. Call 911, he yelled, looking up at her. No, Courtney snapped, standing over us, her shadow falling across my face. Wait until he stops moving. If we call now, they might save him. And if they save him, he talks. Wait until he is cold. I lay there listening to my son beg for permission to save my life and listening to his wife deny it. I lay there letting the foam run down my neck, letting the betrayal seep into my bones. I counted the seconds, 1, 2, 3. They were watching me die, but I wasn't dying. I was just waiting for my cue. And then through the open window I heard it, the distant wail of sirens getting louder, getting closer. The cavalry was coming. I stopped shaking. I let my body go limp, lying still as a corpse. He stopped, Darius whispered. He stopped moving. Courtney smiled, a terrifying, victorious smile in the dim light. Finally, she whispered, "Happy anniversary, baby, we are rich." She didn't know that the sirens weren't for an ambulance, they were for a paddy wagon, and the floor was hard and cold against my cheek, but I barely felt it because my body was engaged in a violent, chaotic dance of deception. I thrashed my legs against the hardwood, kicking the nightstand with a force that sent the lamp crashing down, shattering the bulb. The room was plunged into a semi-darkness, illuminated only by the hallway light spilling in a jagged rectangle across the carpet. I bit down harder on the foaming tablet tucked under my tongue, and a fresh wave of thick, acrid bubbles filled my mouth, spilling over my lips and running down my chin onto my neck. It tasted like chalk and bitterness, but to them it must have looked like the end, like the final agonizing moments of a heart giving out under the strain of poison. Through the haze of my own performance, I saw them standing in the doorway, framed by the light like silhouettes of judgment. Darius was the first to move, the shock breaking through his paralysis. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside me, his hands hovering over my convulsing body, too afraid to touch me, too afraid to intervene. "Dad," he screamed, his voice cracking with a terror that sounded almost genuine. "Oh God, Dad, what is happening? Look at him. Courtney, look at his mouth." He reached for my shoulder, his hands shaking uncontrollably. I felt his grip weak and sweaty, clammy with fear. He was crying now, big, heaving sobs that shook his frame. "He is dying," Darius wailed. "He is having a seizure or a heart attack. We have to do something. Call 911. Where is my phone?" I heard the sound of him fumbling in his pocket, the frantic tapping of fingers on a screen, trying to summon help, trying to undo the sin he had committed. But then a shadow fell over us, a cold, sharp shadow that blocked out the hallway light. Courtney stepped into the room. She did not run. She did not scream. She walked with the deliberate calm of a butcher inspecting a carcass. "Stop," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through Darius. Panic, like a knife, put the phone away. Darius looked up at her, the phone glowing in his hand, his face wet with tears. "What are you talking about? Look at him. He is foaming at the mouth. We have to call the ambulance. They can save him." "No," Courtney snapped. She bent down and snatched the phone from his hand, her movement precise and violent. She tapped the screen, ending the call before it could connect. "If they save him," she hissed, leaning close to Darius, face her eyes manic and wide. "If they save him, he survives, and if he survives, the doctors will find the T in his system, they will find the digoxin, they will call the police, and we go to jail for attempted murder. Is that what you want, Darius? Do you want to spend the rest of your life in a cage?" Darius looked at me, then back at her, his conflict tearing him apart. "But he is my dad," he whispered, the fight draining out of him. "He is in pain. Look at him suffering." "He is not suffering," Courtney said, standing up and taking a step back, looking down at me with absolute detachment. "His brain is gone. This is just the body shutting down. It is a reflex, Darius, like a chicken with its head cut off. He doesn't feel anything." I thrashed harder, letting out a gargled, choking moan, a sound that begged for mercy, a sound that should have melted a stone heart. I arched my back, my fingers clawing at the carpet, scratching at the fibers, trying to show them I was alive, trying to give Darius one last chance to be a man. "Please, Courtney," Darius begged, reaching for his phone again. "Just let me call. Maybe it is not too late." Courtney kicked his hand away, not hard, but with enough force to show who was in charge. "We wait," she said, checking her watch, the diamond-encrusted watch that I had bought her for her 30th birthday. "We wait 30 minutes. That is all it takes once he stops moving, once he is cold. Then we call. We tell them we found him like this. We tell them he must have passed in his sleep and the seizure happened before we woke up. 30 minutes. Darius choked out, looking at me with horror. 30 minutes to ensure a $2 million payout. Courtney said, her voice changing, becoming soft, seductive. The voice of the serpent. 30 minutes to clear your debt. Darius, 30 minutes to keep this house to save us from the Omega Group. Think about it, baby. Just half an hour of silence, and then we are free. Forever. I lay there listening to her barter my life for a ledger balance. I felt the foam drying sticky on my cheek. I felt the vibration of Darius sobbing quietly, a pathetic rhythmic sound of a man surrendering his soul. He didn't fight her anymore. He didn't reach for the phone. He just sat there holding my hand, crying, whispering, "I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry," over and over again, as if his apology could scrub the blood from his hands. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up and grab him by the throat and shake the cowardice out of him. I wanted to tell him that I had scraped my knees, working double shifts on the docks so he could have soft hands, and now those soft hands were letting me die, but I couldn't. I had to be the cargo. I had to be the body. The seconds ticked by agonizingly slow. I counted them in my head. 1, Mississippi. 2, Mississippi, keeping time with the beating of my own heart, the heart they thought was failing. Courtney walked over to the window, looking out at the street, checking for witnesses, checking the perimeter. She was calm. She was confident. She was already spending the money in her head. "He is slowing down," she observed, her voice devoid of emotion. "The convulsions are stopping. Good, it won't be long now." I let my movements subside gradually, making the jerking motions less violent, letting my limbs grow heavy, just as I had researched, just as the symptoms would dictate. I let my head roll to the side, facing Darius. My eyes rolled back, showing only the whites. Darius squeezed my hand one last time, then let go, pulling away as if touching death was contagious. "He is gone," he whispered, his voice hollow. "Not yet," Courtney said sharply. "Wait for the full 30 minutes. We have to be sure." Silence descended on the room. A heavy, suffocating silence broken only by the sound of Darius sniffing and the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I lay there perfectly still, holding my breath, taking shallow sips of air only when necessary, playing dead. And in that silence, I heard it. At first, it was just a whisper on the wind, a low, rising wail in the distance. But to my ears, it was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Sirens, not one but many, a chorus of justice approaching from the highway. Courtney turned from the window, frowning. "Do you hear that?" Darius looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "Hear what sirens?" Courtney said, looking out through the blinds. "They are loud. They are coming this way." "Probably just a fire truck," Darius mumbled, wiping his nose. "No," Courtney said, her voice tightening. "They are turning onto our street." I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just waited. The sound grew louder, turning into a deafening roar. Blue and red lights began to flash against the bedroom ceiling, dancing across the walls like a disco ball of judgment. Tires screeched on the pavement outside, right in front of the house, followed by the heavy slam of car doors. "What is going on?" Darius stood up, walking to the window. "Oh my God. Courtney, it is the police. There are 3 cars." "What?" Courtney rushed to his side, pushing the blinds open. "No, no, no. Who called them? We didn't call them." "Did you call them?" Darius asked, looking at her. "No, you idiot. I didn't call them." She screamed, panic finally entering her voice for the first time. Downstairs, there was a thunderous pounding on the front door, followed by a voice amplified by a megaphone. "This is the police. Open the door. We have a warrant. Open it now, or we will breach." Darius spun around, looking at my body on the floor, then at his wife. "What do we do, Courtney? What do we do? They are here." Courtney grabbed his arm, digging her nails in. "Calm down. Darius, listen to me. We stick to the story. We found him like this. He already dead. We didn't do anything. Just keep your mouth shut." I decided it was time. I let out a long, loud inhale, filling my lungs with air, the sound startling them both. They spun around, staring at the corpse on the floor. I opened my eyes. I didn't roll them back this time. I focused them sharp and clear, staring straight at Courtney. I sat up. I wiped the foam from my mouth with the back of my hand and looked at the white froth on my knuckles. Then I looked at my son. Darius screamed a short, high-pitched sound of pure terror. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet and landing hard on his rear end, crawling backwards until he hit the wall. "He is alive!" he shrieked. "He is alive!" Courtney stood frozen, her mouth open, her face draining of color, the bruises on her nose standing out like a mask. I stood up slowly, my joints popping. I adjusted my pajama shirt, smoothing out the wrinkles. I picked up the lamp I had knocked over and set it back on the nightstand. You, Courtney stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. The tea. You drank the tea. I reached into my pillowcase and pulled out the plastic bag filled with the dark, toxic liquid. I held it up, letting the flashing police lights from the window illuminate it. "I didn't drink a drop," I said, my voice steady, deep, the voice of Zeke Washington. Not the invalid they wanted me to be. "I spit every ounce of your poison into this bag." I continued, stepping toward them. "I watched you, Darius. I watched you sit there and cry while your wife counted down the minutes to my death. I gave you 30 minutes to be a man, to pick up that phone and save your father." I stopped, standing over Darius, looking down at him with a disappointment that was heavier than hate. "But 30 minutes was too long," I said softly. 30 minutes was enough to see that my son died a long time ago. Tonight, I just buried the memory of him. Courtney lunged for the door, panic taking over. She had to run. She had to hide. But before she could touch the handle, a tremendous crash shook the house, the front door. Downstairs had been kicked in. "Police, police, go, go, go," voices shouted from below. Heavy boots thundered up the stairs. Courtney backed away from the door, trapped like a rat. "Who called them?" she screamed at me. "Who called them?" "You were in here with us." I smiled, a cold, humorless smile. "I have friends in logistics, Courtney," I said simply. "I know how to track a shipment and I know how to schedule a delivery." The bedroom door burst open, splinters of wood flying into the room. 3 uniformed officers stormed in, guns drawn, followed by a man in a rumpled suit carrying a briefcase. Saul Weiss stepped into the room, looking at me, then at the bag of poison in my hand, then at the terrified couple in the corner. "Right on time," Saul said, nodding at me. "Are you okay, Zeke?" "I am fine." "Saul," I said, handing the bag of tea to the nearest officer, "as evidence." "I am absolutely fine. Officer, handcuff them," I said, pointing at my son and his wife. "They are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse." Darius looked at me, tears streaming down his face again. Real tears this time, tears of a man who realized he had lost everything. "Dad, please," he sobbed. I turned my back on him, walking to the window to look at the lights. "Don't call me Dad," I said quietly. "Call your lawyer. You are going to need one." The chaos that erupted in my bedroom was a symphony of justice that I had orchestrated note by note, and as the heavy boots of the police officers thundered across the floorboards, shaking the very foundation of the house, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me, like the eye of a hurricane, witnessing the destruction of the landscape around it. The room was suddenly crowded, filled with the dark uniforms of the tactical team and the smell of gun oil and adrenaline mixed with the lingering scent of the peppermint tea that was still drying on my chin. Darius was the first to fall. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He simply collapsed under the weight of his own guilt and fear, his legs giving out as a burly officer grabbed him by the shoulder and spun him around, slamming him against the wall with a force that rattled the pictures in the hallway. "Get on the ground! Get on the ground, now!" The officer shouted, his voice, leaving no room for negotiation. Darius slid down the plaster, sobbing uncontrollably, his hands scrabbling uselessly at the carpet. "Please," he wailed. "I didn't do it. It was her idea. I just wanted to call the ambulance. Please don't hurt me." Pathetic. I thought, watching my son disintegrate, he was a man who wanted the rewards of a villain, but lacked the stomach for the crime. Courtney, however, was a different breed. She was a cornered animal, and she fought with the viciousness of a creature that knows the trap has snapped shut but refuses to accept its fate. She backed into the corner near the dresser, her eyes darting frantically between the officers and the open door, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "Don't touch me!" she screamed, swatting at the hand of a female officer who reached for her. "Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? This is a mistake. This is a massive lawsuit waiting to happen." "Ma'am, put your hands behind your back," the officer ordered, stepping forward with handcuffs glinting in the flashing blue lights. "No!" Courtney shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Look at him! Look at the old man! He is crazy! He is suicidal!" We walked in and found him like this. He tried to kill himself with pills. We were trying to save him. We were doing CPR. I stood by the bed holding the bag of poison, my face impassive, watching her spin her web of lies, even as the spiders were eating her alive. She was incredible in a way, lying with such conviction that for a split second the officers hesitated, glancing at the foam on my face and the overturned lamp. "He has dementia," Courtney yelled, seizing on their hesitation. "He has been talking nonsense all day, asking for his dead wife. He tried to overdose because he misses her. Ask anyone. Ask his doctor. We are the victims here. We are the caregivers who found him dying." Saul Weiss stepped forward from the hallway, his suit rumpled, but his authority absolute. He walked right past the police, straight to Courtney, and looked her up and down with the disdain one reserves for something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "Save it for the jury, Mrs. Washington," Saul said, his voice cutting through her hysteria like a razor blade. "We have the toxicology report from the tea you brewed. We have the forged insurance policy, and we have the statement from your husband's loan shark about the deadline tonight." Courtney's face went pale, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. "He is lying." She spat, pointing at Saul. "He is the old man's lawyer. He is in on it. They are trying to frame us. Because Zeke hates me. He hates that I am white. He hates that I married his son. This is a setup." She was grasping at straws, playing the race card, playing the victim card, throwing everything against the wall to see what stuck. Detective Miller, the man in the suit who had entered with the tactical team, held up a hand, silencing the room. He looked at me, then at Courtney, then at the sobbing heap that was Darius. "We need a statement on what happened in this room in the last hour," Miller said, looking around, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We have two conflicting stories here. Suicide or murder." I was about to speak. I was about to tell him exactly what happened, but a movement in the hallway caught my eye. Small bare feet appeared on the carpet, moving silently past the heavy boots of the officers. Leo walked into the room. He was clutching his teddy bear to his chest, his eyes wide but dry. He didn't look at his parents. He didn't look at the guns. He looked straight at the detective. The room went quiet. The presence of a child in a crime scene always has a way of sucking the oxygen out of the air. The officers lowered their weapons slightly, stepping back to give the boy space. "Well, hello there, son," Miller said, his voice softening, dropping to a crouch, so he was eye level with Leo. "You shouldn't be in here, buddy. It is a little scary right now." Leo didn't flinch. He walked past the detective and stood next to me, reaching out to take my hand. His small fingers wrapped around my thumb, anchoring me. Courtney saw him, and a fresh wave of panic washed over her face, followed immediately by a sneer of contempt. "Get him out of here," she snapped at the officers. "He is retarded. He is mute. He doesn't understand anything. He is traumatized, seeing his grandfather try to kill himself." She looked at Leo with pure hatred, knowing that he was the only witness who had been in the house all night. "Don't listen to him," she continued quickly, trying to dismiss him before he could become a factor. "The boy hasn't spoken a word in 3 years. He is broken in the head just like his grandfather." Detective Miller ignored her, keeping his eyes on Leo. "What is your name, son?" Miller asked gently. Leo looked up at me, seeking permission, seeking confirmation that it was safe, that the monsters couldn't hurt him anymore. I squeezed his hand 3 times, the signal we had practiced. Leo took a deep breath, his chest expanding, his posture straightening. He turned his head slowly to look at Courtney, and for the first time in his life, he didn't look down, he didn't cower. He looked at her with the righteous anger of the innocent. "My name is Leo," he said. The sound of his voice was like a bell ringing in a tomb, clear, melodic, and impossibly strong. It wasn't the voice of a toddler. It was the voice of a boy who had been listening and learning in silence for 1,000 days. Darius stopped crying. He lifted his head from the floor, his mouth falling open, staring at his son as if he were seeing a ghost. Courtney froze, her rant dying in her throat, her eyes bulging. Leo continued, turning back to the detective, pointing a steady finger at the woman who had given birth to him. "My mother and father did not try to save Grandpa," he said, his diction perfect, every syllable hitting the air with precision. "They came into the room and saw Grandpa shaking on the floor," Leo said, pointing to the spot where I had lain. "Daddy wanted to call 911. Daddy was crying and holding his phone. He shifted his finger to Darius, who was now trembling violently. looking at his son with a mixture of awe and terror. But Mommy stopped him. Leo said, his voice getting louder, filling the room, pushing back the shadows. Mommy kicked the phone out of his hand. She looked at her watch, the shiny one with the diamonds. He pointed to Courtney's wrist where the watch still glinted under the police lights. She said they had to wait 30 minutes, Leo declared. Dropping the bomb that would vaporize their defense, she said. If they called the ambulance now, Grandpa might live, and if he lived, they would go to jail. She said they had to wait until he was cold, so they could get the insurance money and pay the bad men. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. Even the police officers seemed stunned by the clarity and the detail of the accusation coming from an 8-year-old. Courtney shook her head slowly, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly, like a fish on a dock. He can't, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Leo wasn't done. He reached into the back of his teddy bear, ripping open the Velcro seam that held the battery pack, and pulled out the small black smartphone I had given him. I have the recording, Leo said, handing the phone to Detective Miller. I recorded them in the kitchen talking about the triple dose. I recorded them on the stairs when Mommy broke her nose and blamed Grandpa, and I recorded tonight from under the guest bed. Detective Miller took the phone, looking at it like it was the holy grail of evidence. He looked at Leo with a profound respect. You did good, Leo, Miller said. You did real good. Darius let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, a sound of a mind snapping under the pressure. He speaks, Darius mumbled, staring at the floor. He speaks, Courtney. He speaks, Courtney lunged. Then, not at the police but at Leo, a final desperate act of malice trying to silence the truth. You little brat, she screamed, reaching for him, her face contorted into a mask of pure evil. I knew it. I knew you were faking. But she never got close. Zeke Washington, the man she thought was a frail invalid, stepped in front of the boy, blocking her path with a chest that was broad and hard as a dock piling. Don't you dare! I growled, my voice low and dangerous. If you touch him, I will kill you myself, and I won't need poison to do it. The female officer tackled Courtney from behind, slamming her into the dresser, pinning her arms behind her back. The handcuffs clicked tight, a sound of finality. You have the right to remain silent, the officer recited, dragging Courtney back. Courtney was screaming now, a raw, primal sound of defeat. He is lying, she shrieked. He is a demon. That child is a demon. He tricked us. They both tricked us. Darius was hauled to his feet by 2 officers, his legs dragging. He looked at Leo one last time, his eyes pleading. Leo, son, please, tell them. Daddy wanted to call. Tell them. Daddy was sorry. Leo looked at his father, his face stone cold, a mirror of my own. Sorry doesn't save people. Daddy, Leo said simply. Calling the ambulance saves people. You just watched. The police began to drag them out of the room, out of the house they had tried to steal. Courtney was still screaming, cursing my name, cursing the house, cursing the tea. Darius was silent, his head hanging low, a broken man walking to his doom. I stood in the center of the wreckage of my bedroom, holding Leo's hand. Detective Miller was bagging the phone and the tea, talking quietly into his radio. I looked down at my grandson, the boy who had carried the weight of the world in silence for 3 years. The boy who had just saved my life. You okay, Spy? I asked softly. Leo looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, a real smile touched his lips. He squeezed my hand. Mission accomplished, Grandpa, he said. I pulled him into a hug, burying my face in his hair, breathing in the scent of childhood and innocence that he had almost lost. Mission accomplished indeed, I whispered. The war was over. The enemy was in chains, and the mute grandson had spoken the words that would lock the cell door and throw away the key. Now all that was left was to sweep up the broken glass and rebuild the empire, starting with a cup of real tea. The interrogation room at the precinct smelled of stale coffee and desperation, a distinct odor that I remembered from my days dealing with Port Authority investigations. But this time I sat on the other side of the one-way glass, not as a suspect, but as the executioner of my own family legacy. Beside me stood Detective Miller, his face illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights reflecting off the monitors that showed 2 separate rooms. In room 1 sat Courtney. She was pacing like a caged tiger, Her makeup smeared her designer dress, wrinkled and stained with sweat. She looked frantic, her eyes darting around the gray walls, searching for a loophole for an exit strategy. In room 2 sat my son Darius. He was slumped over the metal table, his head in his hands, sobbing quietly. A broken man who had finally run out of places to hide. I placed the evidence on the desk in the observation room, laying it out with the precision of a logistics manager handling a high-value shipment. First, the Ziploc bag containing the toxic tea, the liquid dark and ominous looking like motor oil. Next, the small smartphone I had given Leo. And finally, the teddy bear with the camera hidden in its eye. "This is everything, Miller," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "The tea contains lethal doses of digoxin and warfarin. The lab report is in your email. The phone contains audio recordings of the conspiracy and the bear." "Well, the bear saw everything." Miller nodded, picking up the bear and plugging it into the precinct's computer system. He pulled up the video file from tonight. The screen flickered to life, showing a low-angle view from the corner of my bedroom. We watched in silence as the video played, showing Courtney mixing the tea, showing her forcing it down my throat, showing Darius weeping while she checked her watch, counting down the minutes to my death. It was sickening to watch it in high definition, to see the callousness on her face, the way she looked at me, not as a person but as a paycheck. Miller stopped the video and turned to me. "This is a slam dunk for attempted murder, Zeke, but we need to know why." "Money," I said simply, "debt, greed, and a soul that is emptier than a shipping container lost at sea." Miller sighed and pressed the button on the microphone, leaning toward the glass. Looking into Courtney's room. "Let's see what she has to say," he muttered. He walked into her interrogation room, leaving me alone behind the glass. I put on the headphones, listening to the audio feed. Courtney stopped pacing the moment Miller entered. She sat down, smoothing her dress, composing her face into a mask of righteous indignation. "I want my lawyer," she snapped immediately. "I am a victim here, detective. My husband is abusive. He forced me into this." Miller sat down, slowly placing a file folder on the table. "Interesting, Mrs. Washington, because according to the video evidence we just reviewed, you were the one administering the poison. You were the one checking the watch. You were the one stopping your husband from calling 911. Courtney didn't blink. She was a sociopath fueled by survival instinct. "Darius made me." She lied smoothly, leaning forward, tears welling up in her eyes. Instantly on command. "He has a gambling problem. Detective, he owes money to dangerous people. He threatened me. He said if I didn't help him kill his father, he would kill me and our son Leo." I was terrified. I was just doing what I had to do to survive. I clenched my fists, listening to her. She was throwing Darius under the bus without a second thought. She was painting herself as the battered wife, forced into crime. "He planned it all," she continued, gaining confidence. "He bought the insurance policy. He forged the deed. I begged him to stop, but he is violent. Look at my nose. He broke my nose when I tried to leave." She pointed to the bandage on her face, the injury she had sustained falling down the stairs because of her own greed. Miller didn't buy it, but he played along, nodding writing notes. "So it was all Darius' idea?" Miller asked. 100%. Courtney said he hates his father. He has always hated him. He wanted the money. He wanted the house. I am innocent, detective. I am just a mother trying to protect her child. Miller stood up, closing the folder. "Thank you, Mrs. Washington. Sit tight." He walked out of the room and came back to the observation area. He looked at me and shook his head. "She is cold. Zeke, ice cold." He went into room 2, where Darius was still crying. "Darius, look at me," Miller said, sitting down hard, slamming the folder on the table. Darius looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." Miller leaned in. "Save your apologies. Your wife just gave a full statement." "Darius, she says this was all your idea. She says you forced her. She says you threatened to kill her and Leo. If she didn't help you poison your father, she says, you are the monster and she is the victim." Darius froze, his mouth falling open. He blinked once, twice, processing the betrayal. She said that he stammered. "She is pinning it all on you, son," Miller said, ruthless. "She is going to walk and you are going to prison for the rest of your life. Unless you tell me the truth right now." Darius began to shake, a low laugh bubbling up from his chest, a hysterical sound that bordered on madness. She said, "I forced her." He laughed, wiping his nose. She said, "I am the monster." He looked at the two-way mirror as if he knew I was standing there. "She killed my mother," Darius whispered. The room went silent. The air suddenly sucked out of the space. Miller froze his pen, hovering over the paper. "What did you say, Darius?" Miller asked, his voice very quiet. Darius looked up, his eyes dead hollow. "Courtney," he said, his voice gaining strength, fueled by a hatred that had been buried for 3 years. "Courtney killed my mother, Ruth. It wasn't an accident. She didn't slip on the carpet. I felt my knees give out. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself, listening to the confession I had dreaded, but expected. "Tell me," Miller said. "Mom found out about the money," Darius continued, tears streaming down his face again. "Mom found out Courtney had been stealing from Dad's accounts, forging checks. Courtney was buying jewelry bags, sending money to her parents. Mom confronted her on the stairs. She had the bank statements in her hand. She said she was going to tell Dad. She said she was calling the police." Darius took a shuddering breath. "I was in the garage. I heard them arguing. I heard Mom scream, and then a thud, a terrible heavy thud. I closed my eyes, picturing my Ruth falling, my beautiful kind. Ruth broken at the bottom of the stairs. I ran inside. Darius sobbed, and Courtney was standing at the top of the stairs looking down. She didn't look scared. She looked annoyed. She looked like she had just dropped a plate, not a person." "And you didn't call the police?" Miller asked. "She told me it was an accident at first," Darius said, "but then she told me that if I called the police she would tell them I pushed her. She said no one would believe me because of my gambling debts. She said we were in this together. She manipulated me. She controlled me. And then she saw Leo." Leo Miller. "Prompted, Leo was hiding behind the plant." Darius whispered. "He saw it all. He saw her push. Mom, Courtney grabbed him. She shook him. She told him if he ever spoke she would kill me. She terrified him into silence for 3 years. I watched my son confess to being an accessory to the murder of the woman who gave him birth. I watched him admit that he had let his wife terrorize his son and kill his mother, all to save his own skin. It is true, I said to the glass, speaking to no one. It is all true. Miller stood up, his face grim. He walked out of the interrogation room and signaled to his team. Reopen the Ruth Washington case file. Miller barked at a uniformed officer. Now get me the coroner's report from 3 years ago and bring the boy in for a statement. An hour later, I sat in a soft chair in the captain's office holding a cup of tea. Real tea. This time Leo sat beside me holding his bear. Detective Miller walked in holding a stack of files. It matches, Miller said, placing the files on the desk. Darius S. Confession matches the forensic details we missed 3 years ago. The bruising on your wife's back was consistent with a shove, not a fall. And Leo? He looked at my grandson with a gentle smile. Leo gave us a statement. He showed us exactly how she stood, exactly how she pushed it. Is detailed, Zeke. It is consistent. It is the truth. I looked at Leo, my brave little soldier. He had carried this burden alone, protecting me, protecting his father, hoping someone would eventually listen. Courtney Washington is being charged with first-degree murder for the death of Ruth Washington and attempted murder for you. Miller said, his voice heavy with the gravity of the charges. Darius is being charged as an accessory to murder and conspiracy, given the flight risk, given the severity of the crimes and the witness intimidation. He paused, looking me in the eye. The magistrate has denied bail for both of them. They are being transferred to the county lockup tonight. They will await trial in jail. They aren't coming home. Zeke. Ever. I nodded, a heavy weight lifting off my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was relief. The relief of a surgeon who has finally cut out the rot. Can I see them? I asked one last time. Miller hesitated, then nodded through the glass. Only I walked back to the observation room, looking through the window into the holding cell where they were being processed. Courtney was screaming at a guard, her face twisted in rage, still blaming everyone but herself. She looked ugly, her soul finally visible on her face. Darius was sitting on a bench, head in his hands, silent. I pressed my hand against the glass. Goodbye, I whispered. I turned around and walked away, taking Leo's hand. Come on, Spy, I said. Let's go home. As we walked out of the precinct into the cool night air, the sun was just beginning to rise over the city, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. A new day was breaking, and for the first time in 3 years, the silence in my life wasn't filled with secrets. It was filled with peace. Leo looked up at me and smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Breakfast, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice clear and bright. "Yes, Leo," I said, "pancakes. Lots of pancakes." We walked down the steps, leaving the monsters behind in their cages, ready to start the rest of our lives. The visiting room at the county jail was a place where hope went to die. It was a long, sterile corridor lined with reinforced glass partitions, smelling of industrial disinfectant and stale sweat. The air was cold, kept at a temperature designed to subdue tempers and keep the inmates uncomfortable. I sat on a metal stool bolted to the floor, waiting for the man who used to be my son. I was wearing my best suit, a charcoal gray three-piece that I used to wear for board meetings when I was closing multi-million-dollar logistics contracts. I wanted to look like the man I was, the man Darius had underestimated. I smoothed the crease in my trousers and placed a single manila envelope on the narrow stainless steel ledge in front of the glass. The heavy steel door on the other side buzzed and clanked open. Darius walked in, shuffling in shackles, his wrists handcuffed to a belly chain, his ankles bound by irons. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. In just 48 hours, he had aged 10 years. His skin was sallow, his eyes sunken and rimmed with red, raw from crying and lack of sleep. He saw me, and for a second a flicker of hope lit up his face, a pathetic, desperate hope. He shuffled to the stool and sat down, picking up the black phone handset with trembling hands. I picked up my receiver, holding it to my ear but saying nothing. I just watched him. "Dad." Darius choked out, his voice tinny and distorted through the phone. "Dad, thank God you came. Please, you have to help me. You have to get me out of here." I looked at him calmly, observing the terror in his eyes like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. "I cannot get you out." "Darius," I said, my voice steady. "The judge denied bail. You are charged with accessory to murder and attempted murder. You are going to be here for a very long time." No, you don't understand," Darius stammered, leaning forward, his forehead pressing against the dirty glass. "It is not just the jail, Dad. It is the other inmates I am in general. Population and word travels fast." He looked over his shoulder nervously, as if the shadows in the corner were listening. "The Omega Group." He whispered the name, trembling on his lips. "Tony Ranging knows I am here. His guys are in here. Dad. I saw one of them in the yard yesterday. He made a sign, a throat-slitting sign. They know I owe them $500,000, and now that I am in here, I can't pay. They are going to kill me, Dad. They are going to shank me in the shower or beat me to death in my cell. You have to pay them. Please sell the house, sell my car, just pay them off so I can live." I listened to him begging for his life, begging me to use my money, the money he tried to kill me for, to save him from the consequences of his own greed. It was almost impressive how self-absorbed he remained, even at the edge of the abyss. He didn't ask about Leo. He didn't apologize for his mother. He just wanted to survive. I leaned in closer to the glass, my eyes locking onto his. "You are right, Darius," I said. "Softly, the Omega Group is dangerous. Tony Ranging is a businessman, and he doesn't like bad debt. He doesn't like losing $500,000. Darius began to weep, tears streaming down his face, splashing onto the orange fabric of his jumpsuit. "I am dead," he sobbed. "I am a dead man." "No, you are not," I corrected him. "You are not going to die, Darius. No one is going to touch you in here." Darius looked up, confusion warring with his fear. "What do you mean they want their money?" I reached for the manila envelope and pulled out a document. It was a single sheet of heavy legal paper with a gold seal at the bottom. I pressed it against the glass so he could read it. "Look at the header, Darius," I commanded. "Read it." He squinted his eyes, darting across the page. "Transfer of debt obligation," he read slowly. "Assignee, Zeke Holdings, LLC." I pulled the paper back and placed it on the ledge. "You don't owe Tony." "Ranging a dime," I said. "I paid him a visit yesterday morning right after I left the police station. I sat down with Tony in the back of his dry cleaning shop, and we had a very productive conversation." Darius stared at me, his mouth hanging open. You went to Tony?" "I did. I continued. I explained the situation. I told him that his debtor was currently indisposed and facing a life sentence. I explained that dead men don't pay bills, and that trying to collect from you inside prison would just bring heat on his organization that he doesn't need. I paused, letting the information sink in. So I made him an offer. I bought your debt. Darius, I wrote a check from Zeke Holdings for $500,000 plus a 10% convenience fee to Tony. In exchange, he transferred the legal ownership of your loan to my company. He signed over the promissory note and he called off his dogs. Darius slumped against the glass, a look of pure relief washing over him. He let out a long, shuddering breath, closing his eyes. "Oh God, thank you, Dad," he whispered. "Thank you. You saved me. You paid it off. I knew you wouldn't let them kill me. I knew you still loved me." I watched him bask in his delusion, thinking that this was an act of paternal mercy, thinking that I was the safety net that would always catch him. I let him have that moment for exactly 5 seconds before I crushed it. "I didn't save you, Darius," I said, my voice dropping an octave, turning cold as the grave, "and I certainly didn't forgive you." Darius opened his eyes, the smile fading from his lips. "What I didn't pay the debt to set you free," I said, leaning forward until my breath fogged the glass. "I bought the debt, Darius. That means you don't owe the mafia anymore. You owe me." I tapped the glass with my finger right over his heart. "I am your creditor now, and unlike Tony Ranging, I don't break legs, I break lives." Darius pulled back, looking at me as if I had turned into a monster. But you are my dad," he stammered. "No," I said, cutting him off. "Your dad was the man you tried to poison. Your dad was the man whose signature you forged. Your dad died the moment you watched him foaming at the mouth and decided to wait 30 minutes. I stood up, pacing slowly in the small cubicle. "Here is how it works now," I said, looking down at him. "I own a legally binding debt of $500,000 against you, since you are incarcerated and cannot work to repay it. I have initiated a liquidation of your assets to recover my capital." Darius' eyes went wide. My assets, everything I listed, ticking them off on my fingers. "The Porsche Cayenne you leased in your name. I bought out the lease and sold it this morning. The proceeds go to the debt your collection of designer watches. The Rolex, the Breitling seized and currently being auctioned, your wardrobe, the Italian suits, the shoes, all of it. Seizure orders have been executed, but I need money for commissary," Darius cried. "I need money for phone calls, for soap, for food." "You have nothing," I said flatly. "Your bank accounts have been frozen and drained to pay legal fees and partial restitution to the estate. Every single penny you had or thought you had is gone." Darius looked around the room, panic setting in again. "But Dad..." "Zeke, please, you can't leave me with nothing in here without commissary money. I am a target anyway. You will have a roof over your head and 3 meals a day provided by the state. I said that is more than you were willing to give me. Remember? You wanted to put me in a pine box." I sat back down, looking him square in the eye. "And as for the house," I continued, "the house you tried to steal by forging the deed. I have filed a civil suit against you for fraud, adding another layer to your prison time, but more importantly, I am selling the house." "Selling it," Darius whispered. "But that is my home." "It was never your home," I snapped. "It was my house that I let a parasite live in. I am selling it, and I am taking the money along with Leo, and we are moving to Florida." The mention of his son made Darius flinch. "Leo," he asked, his voice trembling. Does he ask about me?" I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "He asked if he could have pancakes," I said. "He asked if we could get a dog. He hasn't asked about you once." "Darius, not once. He knows who the hero of the story is, and he knows who the villain is." Darius put his head in his hands, sobbing again. But this time it was the hopeless sobbing of a man who realized there was no safety net left. "Why are you doing this?" he wept. "Why didn't you just let Tony kill me? It would have been faster." "Because death is too easy," I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. "Death is an escape, Darius, and you don't get to escape. You get to sit in a cell for 25 years to life, thinking about every choice you made. You get to wake up every morning in a cage, knowing that the father you tried to kill owns the very shirt on your back." I picked up the manila envelope. "I will make sure a copy of this debt transfer is put in your file. So the guards know you are indigent. So they know no one is sending you money. Don't bother calling collect. I have blocked the number. I turned to leave my hand on the heavy steel door handle. Dad. Darius screamed, slamming his hand against the glass. Don't leave me, please. I am scared. I looked back at him one last time, seeing the reflection of a stranger in the glass. You should be, I said simply. I walked out of the visiting room, leaving him screaming my name, leaving him to the cold mercy of the justice system. As I walked through the metal detectors and out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot, I took a deep breath of fresh air. I pulled my phone out and dialed Saul Weiss. It is done, Saul, I said. The debt is secured. Liquidate everything he owns down to the last pair of cufflinks. Put the proceeds into Leo's trust fund. Understood, Zeke. Saul's voice came back, warm and reassuring. How do you feel? I looked back at the gray fortress of the jail, knowing my son was inside, knowing he would rot there until he was an old man. I feel like the books are finally balanced. I said. I got into my car where Leo was waiting in the back seat, playing a game on his tablet. He looked up and smiled a bright, unburdened smile. Ready for ice cream, Grandpa? He asked. I started the engine purring like a satisfied cat. Yes, Spy, I said. We have earned it. I drove away, not looking in the rearview mirror, not looking back at the past. The future was sitting in my back seat, and for the first time in a long time, the road ahead was clear. The Florida sun has a way of warming your bones that feels different from the cold gray light of the Northeast. It feels like forgiveness, like a second chance granted by the universe. After a long, dark winter, I sat on the terrace of our new home, watching the palm trees sway in the gentle Atlantic breeze, holding a porcelain cup in my hands, the steam rising in delicate swirls, dancing in the afternoon light. Down on the driveway, the rhythmic thumping of a basketball against the pavement was the best sound I had ever heard. It was the heartbeat of my new life, a steady, strong rhythm that replaced the erratic, anxious ticking of the clock in that house of horrors back north. Leo was out there wearing an oversized jersey and high-top sneakers, dribbling with a dexterity that amazed me. He moved with the fluid grace of a child who had finally been allowed to put down a heavy weight. He wasn't looking over his shoulder anymore. He wasn't checking the shadows for monsters. He was just a 9-year-old boy trying to perfect his jump shot. I took a sip of my tea. It was Earl Grey, strong and hot with a slice of lemon and a teaspoon of honey. It was simple. It was honest. And most importantly, it was safe for a long time. I couldn't look at a teacup without remembering the metallic taste of poison, without remembering the betrayal that had almost stopped my heart. But time is a powerful healer, especially when it is aided by justice. Justice had been swift and it had been absolute. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the basketball fade into the background as I remembered the final day in the courtroom 6 months ago. The judge had not been lenient. The evidence was overwhelming. The video of Courtney mixing the toxins, the audio of Darius conspiring to let me die, and the testimony of a brave little boy who pointed a finger at his own parents. The jury didn't need long to deliberate guilty on all counts. But it was the sentencing that truly closed the book. The district attorney had pushed for the maximum penalty, citing the aggravating circumstances of Ruth's murder 3 years prior. They had exhumed my wife's body. They had found the fractures consistent with the fall, and they had linked Courtney's timeline to the crime. Life without the possibility of parole for Courtney Washington for the murder of Ruth Washington and the attempted murder of Isaiah Washington. Life with a minimum of 30 years for Darius Washington for conspiracy, accessory to murder, and fraud. I remembered looking at them as the sentences were read. Courtney was screaming, cursing the judge, cursing me, claiming it was all a conspiracy until the bailiffs dragged her out, kicking and screaming, her vanity finally crushed under the weight of her sins. Darius had looked at me one last time. He didn't scream. He just mouthed the word, goodbye. He looked small in his prison uniform, a man who had gambled his soul and lost everything. I didn't wave back. I didn't cry. I simply turned my back and walked out of the courtroom, holding Leo's hand, leaving the ghosts of my past to rot in the cages they had built for themselves. I opened my eyes, returning to the present. The Florida sun was still shining, the ocean was still blue, and my grandson was still free. I watched as our new dog, a golden retriever named Duke, chased the loose ball, barking happily. Leo laughed a loud, uninhibited sound that rose up to the terrace like a prayer. "Pass it here!" Duke, Leo shouted, wrestling the ball away from the dog. I smiled, feeling a lump in my throat. That wasn't from sadness, but from gratitude. I had lost a son. That was a pain that would never fully go away. A scar on my heart that would ache when the weather turned, but I had saved a grandson. I had pruned the rotting branch to save the tree. It was a terrible price to pay. But looking at Leo now, healthy, happy, and vocal, I knew I would pay it again 1,000 times over. Some legacies aren't about the money you leave behind or the buildings that bear your name. Some legacies are about the cycles of abuse. You break the secrets you refuse to keep and the children you protect from the darkness. I picked up the teapot and poured another cup, watching the amber liquid fill the china, losing yourself in the ritual of it, Grandpa. I looked up. Leo was running up the steps to the terrace, his face flushed with exertion and joy, Duke following close at his heels, wagging his tail. "Did you see that shot?" Leo panted, leaning against the railing. "Nothing but net." "I saw it." "Spy," I said, smiling. "It was a perfect shot. You are getting tall. I think you are going to be taller than me." Leo grinned, grabbing a cookie from the plate on the table. He took a big bite, crumbs falling on his jersey. "Hey, Grandpa," he asked, looking at the cup in my hand. "Yeah, kiddo, is that the good tea?" I looked down at the cup, swirling the liquid gently. I thought about the tea. Courtney had made the tea that was meant to put me to sleep forever. I thought about the lies, the manipulation, the silence. Then I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. "It is the best tea in the world." "Leo," I said. Leo tilted his head. "Why is it the best?" I looked him in the eye, the boy who had found his voice and saved us both. "Because," I said, setting the cup down with a contented clink. "It doesn't have the taste of betrayal, it tastes like freedom." Leo smiled, understanding more than a 9-year-old should have to understand. "Cool," he said, grabbing the ball. "I am going to make another 3-pointer, watch me." I watched him run back down the driveway, Duke barking at his heels. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes and listening to the ocean. I was 73 years old. I was alone in a way I had never expected to be, but I was at peace. The war was over, the monsters were gone, and for the first time in a long time, the tea was just tea and life was good. Trust is the foundation of family, but blind trust is a recipe for disaster. We often ignore the red flags in those we love, believing blood is thicker than water. But greed recognizes no bloodline. My silence protected me, and my grandson's silence saved us both. True legacy isn't the money you leave behind. It's the values you instill and the courage to cut out the rot, even if it shares your last name. Protect your peace, verify your circle, and never underestimate the quiet ones. They are observing everything. If this story moved you, or if you've ever had to make a hard choice to protect your family, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments, have you ever dealt with a toxic family member, and how did you handle it? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay safe, stay observant, and cherish the ones who truly love you.